All right. Do I have a motion to return to open session?
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Roundtree. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Gitchery?
Yes.
Ms. Parton? Yes. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to certify closed session that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered?
So moved.
Ms. Purcell and Ms. Franklin. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Gitchery?
Yes.
Ms. Parton? Yes. Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Do I have a motion to long-term suspend student A with time served and allow a return to school?
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Roundtree and Ms. Purcell. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond? Yes. Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Gitchery?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. All right. We'll start off tonight with our honors, awards, and recognitions. Start off with our mission and belief statements. Our student representatives tonight are Asia McCone and from Eastern Montgomery High School, and Disha, where are you at? Disha Talagia, got it, from Christiansburg High School. Will you please read our mission and belief statements?
MCPS is an innovative educational community. We value diversity and we are committed to equity and inclusion. MCPS empowers learners to realize success in an ever-changing global society through collaboration with communities, families, staff, and students. MCPS provides a safe, engaging learning environment and an international exposure to positive social, emotional, and academic experiences. Beliefs. All students can learn in order to pursue their dreams. Schools are safe places of joy, wonder, and creativity. Every person deserves to be loved, valued, and respected. Kindness is an essential skill of responsible, productive community member. The diversity of our community is one of our greatest strengths.
All people deserve equitable access to opportunities and resources. Every child deserves an advocate. Honoring the voices of students and other stakeholders strengthens the school community. Open communication and feedback are vital to our growth. Learning and teaching are collective efforts that begin at birth and involve the entire community. Relationship building and high expectations are foundational to student success.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Next up is the student representative reports. Disha, do you have a report from Christiansburg High School?
I do. CHS has had a great start to the 2024-25 school year and is excited about continuing to focus on the 3 core values of being respectful, responsible, and connected. If you had not had the opportunity to take a ride down Independence Boulevard over the past few weeks, you are missing some significant progress to the new academic wing, bus loop, cafeteria, auxiliary gymnasium, and the library that is currently being constructed. Over the summer, there was a vast amount of work completed, and CHS is displaying the new up-and-coming trend of industrial chic on the interior of the building. Students have handled these changes with ease and are encouraged with the progress of the new space. Despite some initial concerns and worries over the new cell phone policy instituted by MCPS, it has been received positively by students, staff, and family. At most, CHS has confiscated a total of 31 phones or devices on the first day, and we have not had a greater than 8 devices over the past 2 weeks. To natural observers, you will now see that students with their eyes up in the hallways, hearing a buzz in the lunchroom, witnessing more students checking out library books, students engaging in conversation, and something we did not account for, learning how to read a traditional clock. but overall, it has been a welcome and significant change to our building. The administrative team rewarded the CHS students at the conclusion of our first full week of school with ice cream sandwiches for their successful start to the school year. CHS hosted their annual club fair earlier today in the gymnasium. We had a great representation of student interests that ranged from a Global Connections Club to our disc golf club. Overall, we had 30+ student-run clubs offered to the student body. We are excited to be hosting the second annual Festivals of the Band at CHS on Saturday, September 14th from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. and will include 10 different schools along with a special performance by the Marching Virginians. We are also gearing up for our annual Homecoming Week that will take place from September 23rd to 28th. That will include our Homecoming Parade, Homecoming Spirit Days, the Homecoming Prep Rally, Homecoming Games, and Homecoming Dance. To conclude, our fall athletic teams are off to a great start. The football teams won their benefit game against Giles and their first official game of the season against Floyd County. Volleyball team is undefeated to start the season. The boys and girls cross-country team have their first meet of the season tonight in Bassett and will be competing again on Saturday at Knights Invitational in Salem. The golf team is off to a great start this season and have their eyes set on making the state tournament for the first time in over 25 years. And lastly, the competition cheer team have their first competition of the season this coming weekend at Heritage High School.
Great, thank you, Disha. Asia, do you have a report from Eastern Montgomery High School?
Yes, I do. Good evening. Eastern Montgomery started off the new school year with an amazing turnout for our August 12th back-to-school night. The school is full of excited students and parents eager to begin the new school year. We hope to have the same excitement at the parent night coming up this Thursday, in which parents of juniors and seniors will come to learn more about the college world and hear guidance about how to begin the next chapter in their lives. Eastern Montgomery has been thriving the first weeks of the 2024 through 2025 school year. We found out last week that our 2023 through 2024 yearbook earned gold level recognition in the National Yearbook Program of Excellence. This means that our yearbook was ranked in the top 5% nationally. We have also seen positive new numbers within our clubs and have grown interest throughout the school in new activities and ideas being introduced every day. Our sports programs have been flourishing, and we are off to a great start as well. The cross-country team had their opening race for the season at Blacksburg High School with the Blacksburg Relay. It was a fun way to start off the season, and many of our runners ran phenomenal times. Golf is well into their season, as is looking sharp with new team bags courtesy of the Patron Fund. Our volleyball teams got off to a great start, winning their home opener in straight sets over Class 1 Power Gaylocks. Our football team had their first home game on Friday, along with cheer as well. We had a large amount of support from our student section, not only at the Friday night football game, but also at our volleyball game. I discussed with some of my fellow peers about positive observations they have seen so far in our school this year. I was told that this school year has already been very sociable, interactive, and some even used the word fun. Some examples are our monthly birthday brownies, the music played over the intercoms during class changes, and finding a club or activity that's offered that suits them and shows off their personality. When discussing with my fellow peers about some negative observations they have seen at our school, the most talked about by far was our school lunch. Many students feel that the menu is lacking day-to-day options. Students believe that the same food is offered every day, which is usually hamburgers or pizza. We have also heard a large request for washing the fruits better, as we have gotten reports back that they give off a chemical-like aftertaste. Eastern Montgomery is very grateful for the free lunch program that is offered at our school. It has helped many families in our community. The student body is simply requesting a little more variety. Overall, Eastern Montgomery is having an amazing start to the school year and cannot wait to see what's to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Asia. All right, next up are our September Seniors of the Month. Dr. Barbara Wickham, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, will start our presentation.
Of an outstanding senior from each of our 4 high schools. Photos and leadership profiles of these exceptional students will be displayed on the screen during the presentation and in the lobby of our central office. Our presentation format provides a snapshot of each senior, along with a quote from the teacher or administrator who nominated them for this recognition. Each principal will come forward to present in the following order: David Hurd, principal of Auburn High School; Chris Stewart, principal of Blacksburg High School; Shane Gwynn, principal of Christiansburg High School; and Todd Lewis, principal of Eastern Montgomery High School. Mr. Hurd.
At this time, I'd like to ask the Auburn High School Senior of the Month, Shane Riggins, and his mother, Diana, to join me at the podium. Good evening, Dr. Bragan, Ms. Osborne, Chair Hudson, and members of the board. I'm David Hurd, principal of Auburn High School, and the September Senior of the Month for Auburn High School is Shane Riggins. Shane is a student with a 4.2 grade point average and a variety of accomplishments outside of the classroom. One teacher said about Shane that he's a hardworking, determined, and friendly young man of integrity that shows concern for the well-being and success of others as well as himself. Shane is a joy to teach in the mathematics classroom because he does his best on every task set before him. His goal is to understand the why of the skill and concept, not just to get the correct answer. Shane's desire for success is also seen outside of the classroom. During his attendance at Boys State this summer, he served as a Supreme Court Justice. He also uses his outstanding skills and dedication as a member of the varsity basketball team and the indoor and outdoor track teams, always striving for success. Shane is an outstanding role model for his peers, and he is our Senior of the Month for this month. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Dr. Bragan, it is my pleasure to present to you Blacksburg High School's Senior of the Month. Tonight, I would like to recognize Bryce Abbott as the Blacksburg High School September Senior of the Month. Bryce is here this evening with his parents and his brother. I'd like to invite them up to join me. I'd like to read a brief statement from some of our staff members about Bryce. Bryce truly embodies the qualities of an exceptional leader. His quiet, humble approach to leadership, combined with his genuine kindness and inclusivity, makes a significant impact on everyone around him. In his unified PE class, Bryce's dedication to ensuring that every student, regardless of their abilities, feels welcomed and supported is a testament to his character. His ability to garner respect through his actions, asking insightful questions, completing his work diligently, and putting forth sincere effort illustrates his commitment to both personal and collective growth. Bryce's leadership style, grounded in leading by example, not only fosters a positive environment, but also inspires his peers to follow his example. Congratulations, Bryce.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Bragan, and student representatives. Thank you for this opportunity to highlight one of our seniors this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce the September Senior of the Month for Christiansburg High School as Joshua Cummins. I would like to ask Josh and his family to come forward at this time, please. When asking one of Josh's teachers to describe him, they said, Josh has been an exemplary example of CHS's three core values of being respectful, responsible, and connected. Josh has a kind heart, and it shines through on a daily basis. He works hard in all that he does and strives to be the best version of himself. Josh has a willingness to help his peers and a calm disposition that sets him apart from other students his age. Despite many of his successes, Josh had over has had over the past several years, he continues to remain humble and works to lead by example. The world needs to prepare for all that Josh can and will accomplish, as I know Josh will leave CHS and go the distance with his future endeavors. Joshua plans to attend a 4-year university where he would like to major in cybersecurity and continue his golf career. Congratulations, Josh.
Good evening, school board members, Chair Hudson, Dr. Bragan. It is an honor to be here this evening to recognize the Senior of the Month for Eastern Montgomery High School. She's pulling double duty tonight as both the EMHS Student School Board Representative and also the September Student of the Month, and her name is Asia McCone. She's here with her family, and I ask them to come forward at this time. At this time, I'd like to read a quote from her soccer coach and teacher, Ms. Whitney Shaver. Asia is an all-around academic and athletic inspiration for others in our building. She has high standards for herself and she strives daily to improve upon her skills in all aspects of her life. Asia is qualified to participate in or won state events in FBLA, choir, soccer, and track. If she isn't on the athletic field, you can typically find her volunteering to help raise funds for sports teams, organizing events for student government, or even singing the national anthem before game time. Asia is the true definition of being an active leader in our school community, and I'm incredibly proud of all of her accomplishments. Please join me in congratulating Asia McCone.
Okay, great. Congrats to all those seniors of the month. Next up, Mark Husband will begin our recognition of the Career and Technical Student Organization National Champions, the Blacksburg Middle School FBLA.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to recognize some additional students who have won awards. Tonight, we are recognizing students in a Career and Technical Education Organization. Blacksburg Middle School's Future Business Leaders of America. We recognized this group not long ago at the end of the prior school year for being state champions. We bring back some of those students to recognize them as they went to the national conference over the summer and became national champions. Please welcome to the presentation their teacher, Ms. Lorraine Hedgepeth.
I'll try not to forget my glasses today. Okay, so good evening, Dr. Bragan and school board members and student representatives. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to have our students to be recognized for their leadership and their achievements at our national conference in Orlando, Florida. So there are 4 students, they're very unique, and I do want to say that out of the 11 students, 7 of them made it to the finals and 4 of them were national champions. I want to thank our principal, Dr. Johnson, he's here, and our CTE director, Mark Husband. I want to thank the Blacksburg Middle School teachers because they have been so supportive. And again, I would like to recognize our bookkeeper, Tammy Snodgrass, because managing finances for our chapter is a very significant amount of work, and I'm very grateful for her dedication and support. Finally, I want to thank the parents who, without their support, this recognition could not be possible. And I must tell you that these group of students are very unique. I've known them since they're in 6th grade. 3 of them are high school students. They're 9th graders at Blacksburg High School. And one student, he's not here tonight. He's made a decision to go to a private school in Northern Virginia, but he is going to return to Montgomery County Public Schools, and he's an upcoming 8th grader. And while there is no FBLA chapter at BHS, these students most likely would have become members of a different CTSO, hopefully. And FBLA provides a fantastic opportunity to develop leadership and service skills. And these students are very dedicated to FBLA. They've been officers, very supportive members, and it would be great to see how far these would go if we did have an FBLA chapter at our high school. But nevertheless, I'm here tonight to recognize these students' dedication at our FBLA National Conference in Orlando, Florida. So I would like for, who's first? I would like for Ahmet Dogan's dad to come. Ahmet's dad's going to recognize Ahmet. So Ahmet is, as I said, is attending a private school in Northern Virginia, but I do want to tell you a little bit about Ahmet. I met Ahmet in 6th grade when I was his teacher, and I could tell right away he was very smart and very business-minded. Ahmet's topic at the national conference, I really want to tell you a little bit about it because it's very extensive. It was, his topic was called Exploring Business Issues, and it covered like how does technology affect the business world? And he had to go into the complexities of explaining how this trend of working remotely or anywhere has changed because of technology. And I really think Ahmet was so masterful in his presentation, and that's why he's a national championship. Not only did he, of course, he could speak very well, but he took the time, he had like graphs in his presentation. He even polled business, friends of his family businesses about their questions about the, this trend. And Ahmet was, one of the things I wanted to bring out was in his poll, he asked them, like, what are some of the challenges that affect this trend? And then he also asked them, what are some of the benefits? But then what I thought was so neat, he asked, what should businesses do to increase productivity? And when I say impressive or wow for a 7th grader, he presented at our business, FBLA business dinner. We had a dinner for fundraising, and one of the businesses that was there asked me to ask him would he be willing to do some job shadowing for her. So Ahmet's a very talented young man. He's not here, but I do want to recognize him, so I asked his parents would they come instead. Could y'all give him a big hand of applause? Could he say a few words?
Thank you, Ms. Hitchbeth. Good evening, Chair Hudson, Dr. Bergen, and all the board members. This is an honor for us to be here, and thank you so much for supporting our students and recognizing their success. We also would like to thank Ms. Hitchbeth for the last 2 years. She has been a great helper at each and every stage of the competition. She was with us, she traveled with us, and we would like to thank, on behalf of all the students and parents, thank you so much for your efforts. I also would like to thank BMS and also all the families who were there, who were supporting each other throughout the competition. Thank you so much.
Okay, so next up, I have three unique female students, Sadie, Grace, and Sophie, and I would like for them to come, be recognized. It's Sadie Zhang, Grace Lee, and Sophie Zhang. So when I say national champions, I don't sometimes think people realize how extraordinary this feat is. So at the nationals level, they have a preliminary round, and there are over 50 teams. And then from that preliminary round, this year, they only picked the top 12. And the top 12 will go to the final round, and these three ladies, they placed first. And the reason I think their website was so significant and so extraordinary as well was because they collaborated and they presented really well. So Sadie, she designed the website. She taught herself HTML and CSS. And then Sophie and Grace, they designed like the videos, they did research to do the layout for this website. And their event, of course, once again, had over 50 teams, and they placed first. And I have to say that what website did they develop? What business did they choose? And they chose Carol Lee Donuts. So who doesn't like a donut? So I'm sure they won the judges over already. But most importantly was that they had to do research. They went to Carol Lee Donuts. They purchased a bunch of donuts. They arranged them on like a plate so that they have these pictures for their websites. Not only that, they had individual pictures, so then Sadie programmed it so that when you move the mouse over the donuts, it could change toppings like sprinkles or icing. I mean, this is extraordinary for 8th graders. So these students have put in so much time. They had to have an About Me page. They had to have a contact page where if you clicked, then this site will come up, or page will come up, and you could contact the Curly Donuts business, you know, if it was alive. We did not get to meet with the owner, but we did get to meet with the manager. And she came to the school and she talked to the students. And we practice, I say we practice, they practice a lot, I listen, and I arrange for teachers to come. And Ms. Fortinas, which you guys know is the director of our administrator of gifted programs from MCPS, she was there and she said, wow. So she's asked them to collaborate with her to do a website for the gifted and talented for Montgomery County Public Schools. So that's how good their website was. And I just wanted you guys to know that I've worked with them since 6th grade. They've been to nationals since 6th grade. It's just like, you know, when you meet people and you say you'll never forget, well, I will never forget them. I'll never forget Ahmed. And there's others too that I will never forget. So at this time, would you guys help me recognize Sadie Zane, Grace Lee, and Sophie Zane? Thank you so much.
I'm just wondering if that Carolee website is up, and can we place an order tonight? Because
Well, I'm working on that with the owner. I finally made a good contact, and hopefully I can meet with him.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Our next agenda item is public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters in this community. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. We have the option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Osborne will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue with their business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end of the business meeting. The clock continues through applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. I'll call each speaker up by name in the order that they signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not respond to speakers during public address. The screens will show when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining and when their time is up. Please state your name and the area of the county you live in. The first speaker is Charlene Carpenter, followed by Carol Haas.
Hi, my name is Charlene Carpenter, and I'm from Christiansburg. I'm the mom of 2 boys with special needs. My 9-year-old Micah has multiple invisible disabilities, all likely related to his primary diagnosis of FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I could give you facts about FASD, for example, that it is 2.5 times more prevalent than autism. However, I want to tell you about Micah's personal challenges. He's in 4th grade. He cannot read or write except for his first name. He struggles with anything more than counting and math. His speech is hard to understand to unfamiliar listeners. He has anxiety about meeting new people, going places, and being around a lot of people. He is fidgety and seeks movement often. He is a concrete and visual thinker. He does not understand cause and effect or consequences. His processing speed is slower than his peers, while his IQ is in the low normal range. He also struggles with his activities of daily living at home. As a result of all of these struggles, Micah has very challenging behaviors. He elopes from the classroom and the school. He becomes aggressive, hitting, screaming, name-calling, cussing. No one at the school, the community supports that we've had, K-PACT, therapist, REACH, NRVCS, crisis, even medications, or even medical professionals in the NRV know much, if anything, about FASD. It is brain damage that affects every part of the person's body. MCPS needs specific and specialized training on FASD. He has had all the school services, speech, occupational therapy, TDT, NRVC case management, and he has an IEP. Micah was half days at Falling Branch from January 23rd to May of 2024. He did half days at the YRC from August 23 to February 24. He was discharged due to behavior. Last year, he spent his school day in his special education case manager's office with her and his one-on-one aide. The general education classroom was too overwhelming for him. This year, he is being bused to Minnick and Roanoke, which is an hour-long bus ride one way. He still struggles there, but at least they have more training. The current inclusion model, it sounds great, but it does not work for Micah. He continues to say he hates school, he doesn't want to go, it's too hard, that he's stupid, or that he's a jerk because of these behaviors. He knows that his brain is different from his peers. There needs to be an option for students like Micah within our school division. And September just happens to be FASD Awareness Month.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Next up is Carola Haas, followed by Judy Barliski.
Thank you. My name is Carola Haas. I live in Reiner, Virginia. I applaud the board for requesting a policy on hate speech, and I hope you can find ways to implement real change. Although a policy is probably necessary to move the needle on this issue, it is by no means sufficient. Hate speech is typically defined as speech that is used to silence, humiliate, degrade, persecute, or threaten members of oppressed or marginalized groups. The focus should not be on policing speech or punishing those who say the wrong thing, but on helping to build a community where we don't want to oppress others. Bullies tend to bully because of their own insecurities and pain. We need to build a community where classmates unite in identifying a need for help for students who are lashing out in hatred towards others, as well as in getting help for those who are attacked. Bullies and the families who raised them may think that being the subject of verbal attacks is normal and builds character, so their families may need to be supported too. We don't get stronger if we are attacked in the places where we need to learn and grow. When we have positive relationships and respect, we become strong enough to brush off hateful attacks. But a child can't develop healthily when subjected to those attacks at school. Hate speech doesn't just harm the intended victim, but all members of that marginalized group. When we have coaches who use crude words for female body parts as insults towards players, when we have students who use racist words to describe other students, the atmosphere is not one where students learn how to work together respectfully. Allowing that sort of behavior to be normalized gives the wrong message to all our students. For folks who say the focus should be on reading, writing, and arithmetic, of course those things are important. But no learning can happen without effective communication skills. That is the first priority in a learning community. You can't learn if you can't absorb information from the others in the room. A focus on social emotional skills is essential for students to develop as functional adults. None of our students can succeed if they cannot effectively work with other people. Saying offensive things could cost them a friendship or a job or end in physical violence. And learning how to closely listen, to empathize with others, how to see things from another person's point of view, and how to open up and communicate one's own thoughts and ideas are essential skills. Trainings on implicit bias are eye-opening and help us recognize how we can't assume that, just like me, is a useful definition of normal experiences or behaviors. As we learn more about the different backgrounds and motivations of our peers, we become more effective negotiators. Please make sure that staff and students get education every year on implicit bias and on developing empathy and listening skills so we can all work together as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haas. Next up is Judy Oberliski, followed by Michelle McCock.
Good evening, Chair Hudson, members of the school board, Superintendent Reagan. My name is Judy Borilski, and I live in Blacksburg. Some of you may recognize me. I've served the county for 25 years as a curriculum supervisor. And because I emailed all of you my suggestions related to the policy, I thought I would come and introduce myself to the rest of you. Since retiring 7 years ago, I've continued to work for MCPS students. I've served on the Strategic Plan Equity and Preschool Focus Group, chaired by Judy Diggs, then on Dr. Robert Johnson's Student Code of Conduct Committee that developed the alignment for MCPS with its practices to the Virginia Department of Education Model Guidance for Positive and Preventive Code of Student Conduct Policy and Alternatives to Suspension. As part of that work, the committee developed the leveled matrix that has the administrative managed responses to student behaviors, which includes both behavior intervention and instructional supports that can be put in place prior to suspending students. It also consulted with MCPS Technology Department to create an initial interface for reporting student behaviors and administrative responses. And it met with, gotta check my time, it met with a group of administrators to teach, and teachers to discuss the implementation of practices for classroom managed student behaviors and teacher responses. So it's this work that I based my comments and suggestions related to the hate speech policy. Also, you'll remember that I couched them in the Standards for Reducing Bias and Harassment, a committee I served on at the state level. In summary, I request that the policy include proactive actions to support student behavior, including 1, a plan for teaching expectations that includes the history and harm of hate speech, and 2, the comprehensive implementation of restorative practices and a tiered system of support. Additionally, I suggest disciplinary actions not include exclusionary practices such as in-school suspension as a response for the first infraction, and instead apply behavior interventions and instructional supports to change student behavior. I also suggest disciplinary actions be expanded to include teacher responses to student behavior. I think teachers were their responses were totally left out of the plan. Finally, I suggest the proposed policy include accountability measures. Monitoring implementation of policy is essential to evaluate its equitable application and effectiveness. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my suggestions.
Thank you very much. Next up is Michelle Maycock, followed by Kimberly Williamson.
Good evening, Dr. Bergen, Chair Hudson, and board members and fellow citizens. I am Shelley Maycock. I reside in over toward Target, and I teach English in the English department at Virginia Tech. I'm here to speak in favor of the proposed hate speech policy. In the light of recent testimony by too many MCPS community members, there's no question of a clear need for this policy. This is not just a matter of kids will be kids. All MCPS students must understand that some expressions spoken, for example, by other kids, adults, musical artists, or political figures are not appropriate in school contexts. And we should be able to explain to them in historical detail why these words, even noises, gestures, or symbols are not acceptable. Teachers' accountability needs to also be built in. How they react to them is just as important. If anyone reads the mission statements and beliefs in the MCPS faculty handbook, for example, it is clear why hateful speech cannot be tolerated. Here I chose a few choice phrases as they relate to hate speech. Most important, because hate speech interferes with a student's right to learn. If our students are truly safe, there can be no tolerance for slurs to threaten and disparage them. If our schools are to advocate for all students, there can be no hate speech by anyone in the schools. If our schools are about respectful relationships, we need to educate all members of the community of the schools, surrounding the schools, to be inclusive and respectful. I'm not going to belabor things with a point-by-point discussion of the language of the policy, though I do have some suggestions. Clarity and specifics are needed to improve the language of this crucial policy, which I will also pass along to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kimberly Williamson.
Kimberly Williamson, Christiansburg. While I believe a hate speech policy is necessary and definitely believe the reason being, the way that it affects a person's mind, heart, and soul, whether it's the person receiving it or the person giving it, definitely that's needed. But I wanted to ask a few questions regarding the upcoming policy. Are there any precautions or provisions regarding open, fair, and respectful debate or disagreement over viewpoints so that freedom to disagree is protected and viewpoint discrimination is not then redefined as hate speech? Or what about academic and cultural discussion of historical literature in which certain words may have been used? Finally, will those incidents that are labeled as microaggressions be dealt with fairly with all parties to determine if it actually is an aggression or is actually a misunderstanding among those parties? Just want to make those clarifications.
Okay, great, thank you. And Chris Thomas.
Members of the board, Chris Thomas, Christiansburg. While I commend you on the spirit of the hate speech policy before you tonight, I wonder if it does what you imagine it does. Surely the purpose of the policy is to take seriously the profound harm that certain words represent and to create structures that ensure that all MCPS students can learn in a hate-free environment. But that's not what I see on the docket tonight. The document before the board is one that, in my view, trivializes some language while overreacting to other speech. Rather than setting any clear standard, it defers to the administration, both in the determination of what is or is not hate speech, but also in the assessment of the seriousness of that speech and the consequences for its use. As written, this policy would punish a student with multiple days of in-school suspension for referring to someone as a Karen, which, to be honest, given that MCPS almost certainly has students and faculty named Karen, seems wild to me. But not as wild as the fact that the same policy as written could let another student off the hook with a written warning for repeatedly referring to students or faculty of color as the N-word. While you're all thinking about that read of the document, I'd like you to also consider the fact that we were all fine with me up here dropping Karen in front of God and everyone, but there were audible gasps in this room when a student quoted a slur against LGBTQ people in your previous meeting. And no one, and I mean no one, is going to get up here and actually say the N-word, even if they are speaking in opposition to its use in our schools. All three of these words meet the definition of hate speech as laid out in the policy, but they are not the same, and treating them like they are does everyone a disservice. Now, you might say that this is the sort of nuance that is exactly what all the administrative flexibility in the document is intended to provide, but that opens another can of worms. Are we sure that our existing disciplinary house is in order? Even setting aside some of the one-off problems that we experienced at places like CMS last year, it wasn't that long ago that this board was expressing its concerns about racial disparities in our own disciplinary data. Are we really prepared to ask our school administrators to just wing it on the topic of hate speech? This is a thorny issue, and I wish I could offer you fewer criticisms and more solutions, but policy is a broadsword and not a scalpel. No matter what we put up to paper, it will invariably run up against cases where the policy outcomes are other than what we might hope. So what I ask of you is simple. Start small. Be specific. The policy need not address every terrible thing that might be said in our schools in order to address the most terrible things that might be said. Set a clear expectation around those. Commit yourselves as a board to revisiting these policies and these outcomes in an open and transparent process. And in so doing, make small but incremental progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. And with that, public address is closed. All right, next up are our consent items. If no one wishes to move an item out of consent, we will consider these items approved. Okay. Next up, the payment of the bills. Do I have a motion to approve the payment of the bills as presented?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Franklin and Ms. Bond. Any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin? Yes. Dr. Gitry?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. We are now to our business meeting, and first up is a report from the superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Hudson. I have a few things to report on. One is, we talked about the capital plan, proposed capital plan that is in the beginning phases and discussion and revision as we go through this process at our last school board meeting. And for the schools that are involved, Montgomery Beek, Margaret Beeks, Gilbert Lincoln Elementary, Harding Avenue Elementary, Shawsville Middle School, and Montgomery Central, for those communities, please be on the lookout for the dates we're going to schedule for community forums to solicit feedback from our PTOs, our parents, our staff members, and really anybody in those communities that want to express their opinion on what they think those revisions should look like. We're trying to get as much input as we can before we bring that information back to the school board. We had some preliminary discussions and some potential renovations and their proposed costs may be. But really, for this to be effective, we want our community support. So the communities in those areas where those schools are, please be on the lookout for those forums. As soon as we get those dates scheduled, we will publish them and get them out as much as we can. And please forward that information to anyone that would be interested in having input along those lines. Next up, you may have heard, and we've talked about it a few times, about our pay here. Traditionally, what our employees have gotten is paid once per month at the end of the month, one check for the entire amount of their work during that month. We talked several months ago about moving that to being paid twice a month. And I'm happy to report that we're going to start that on the November 15th pay. So typically we get paid at the end of the month. So around October 30th, our employees will get their pay for October. And then beginning November, instead of waiting till the end of November, that pay will be broken up into two payments, one on November 15th and one on around November 30th, depending on where that holiday falls. And that'll be the same moving forward for the next month, so December 15th and then December 30th or thereabouts. Grateful for all the work that our finance department did and our payroll people in putting that together, because there's a lot more work involved in that than I initially had suspected. So we're happy to be moving forward with that. I didn't want to say that publicly until I was 100% sure we could pull it off. So we better be able to do it now, because I just said it publicly. And wanted to talk briefly about our school resource officers. We think they provide a great service to our community and our schools, and I'm 100% behind having a school resource officer when we can in every building. In some conversations I had with the leaders of law enforcement, they're struggling to get school resource officers, to get the officers to want to sign up for those programs, to just get officers at all, whether that's sheriff's officers or local law enforcement in the towns. So they've come to me with a proposal about something that's permitted in Virginia for retired police officers to serve as school security officers in the buildings. It's something that I want to pursue. I shared some information with the school board, and maybe at a future meeting, if it's permissible, to present on that and talk about what that may or may not look like. So basically, it would be police officers who are retired that will serve as school security officers in the building. One of the differences there would be those school security officers would work for the school system and have direct oversight from us, as opposed to the school resource officers who work for law enforcement that has direct oversight of them there. It's something I think we should discuss, and if the school board, after we present on it, wants to move forward, it would be another discussion that we would have with the Board of Supervisors, because there's a funding piece with that, right? Right now, the Board of Supervisors are directly paying, at least for the sheriff's people that are working in our communities. And I think they're paying some of the freight for the Christiansburg police officers as well. So it's an initial conversation. If the school board would allow me, I'd like to do some type of presentation at a follow-up board meeting on that. And lastly, I have a brief video that we'd like to share, and it's brief, but I think it's great for us as a school board to see some of the fantastic things that are occurring in our school every day. You know, when I get to visit the buildings and see all the great things that are going on, it reminds me of why all of you and why all of us put in this hard work. This is one of our instructional technology resource teachers. He had an idea. He wanted to put something in place. He ran it up the flagpole, and we were able to get the funds to do this, and this is the iteration of that. Thanks, Mr.
We could take kids on virtual field trips to places that they just can't realistically go, or experience things that they can't realistically experience. Things like space, the deep ocean, or travel to other countries and things like that. So it was a project of mine starting last year, and this is it coming to fruition.
It's like putting on a pair of glasses, but you just get an overlay. It's so futuristic. I'm so lucky to be in a generation that we have this stuff.
They're doing the International Space Station, so first they get training on how to navigate the space station in zero-G, so they learn how their body just floats around and how to move by grabbing handholds, and then they have to do missions. So they have to, use the space station arm to grab a hold of other space parts, and connect it to the space station, or they have to do some tinkering on the inside of the space station.
I really like it. I don't know what I would do without visual learning.
Just one example of the many great things that go on in our buildings every day. Chair Hudson, that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. I just want to clarify one thing. The information on the retirees, security officers, I'm not sure you shared that with the whole board yet. You sent an email to...
Did I just share that to the chair?
Yeah.
My mistake. Yeah. I will forward that to all of you as we speak.
Okay.
My apologies.
I could tell from the looks of confusion from over here. Okay, great. Yeah, and over there. All right, great. Thank you so much. Next up, Philip Ashby, a teacher at Auburn Middle School, will share a presentation about the NASA Liftoff Summer Institute.
Good evening, Chair Hudson, members of the board, Dr. Bragan. It's a pleasure to be here, student representatives. I'm going to start by first passing out my manipulatives I brought with me. These are all things from the Institute that I got, and the most important being actual lunar samples and actual meteorite samples from the moon and from meteorites gathered from all across the country. So I'm going to start here with my student representatives and just pass them over, if that's all right. I'm sure, as many people who are educators know, that once you start thinking about what you want to talk about, I had this really pretty slideshow, and I spent all day today at Blacksburg Middle School presenting with these samples to our students. I hit every single science classroom in our 8th grade course level at a middle school level. Before I forget, let me take a chance to thank people who have made this kind of possible. Dr. Wickham, thank you so much for helping organize it. Tony Divler was amazing and helped me get in contact with all the teachers and the principals. Andrew Webb has been instrumental in helping me kind of get the word out. I would not be able to do it here without him. Mark Husband has been awesome in helping give me support whenever I need to go to a conference. Appreciate that. All the teachers at the schools have been phenomenal in reaching out and coordinating with me and making sure we can get these opportunities to our students. And last of all, my principal, Megan Marshall, has been above and beyond helpful in ensuring that I can go to do these opportunities. Otherwise, I'd be at Auburn with the samples and no one else would get to see them. I want to take a moment to pass up my manipulatives. Originally, I was going to spend this presentation gushing about the opportunity I had, and after spending today at Blacksburg and seeing our students, it fell flat. It felt very flat for me to talk about what my experience was, more so than me talking about what experiences we can bring to our students and bring to our employees. Because this is not a one-time deal. This Liftoff Summer Institute happens every year, and they pick 55 teachers from across the country every year. The theme is different every year. So I'm going to show you a little bit what we talked about this year, and then at the end I'm going to talk about how teachers can apply, and I'm going to mention some opportunities that our students and staff can take to get and the opportunities I've had, because it has been life-changing. 2 years ago, I was thinking about quitting teaching. I was very unhappy where I was, and even though I loved what I taught, I just wasn't very engaged. And for Miss Marshall to look at me and go, "I've never seen you come in so excited every day. It's like I just hired you fresh off again." It meant a lot to me that she recognized how much this has changed my outlook on teaching too. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Can I do it? Or just, oh, there's a clicker. Perfect. So this is all 55 teachers from 35 states across our country. I was the only Virginia representative, and I got to go by special circumstances. They had originally had another teacher apply, and she became ill or had another obligation and could not go. And NASA reached out to me directly, or Virginia Space Grant, Ruta Kushiri and Mary Sandy both reached out to me and said, "We want you to go in her place." So I was the only one in this photo that didn't go through the extensive, highly competitive application process, which felt really cool. They all were like, "What video did you do, Ashby?" And I was like, "I didn't do one." And of course, they're all like, "What do you mean you didn't do one?" I was like, "I didn't have to, sorry." It felt fun to be there. I had a great time. The Neutral Buoyancy Lab is where they train astronauts to be zero-G. They do it in a big giant swimming pool that's 40 feet deep. And they have an entire mock of the ISS inside. You'll see pictures here. I'm gonna go pretty quickly because I do want to talk about the opportunities, and I want to respect your time because, like you, I've worked all day, and you've worked all day, and you're probably ready to get home before 10:30, 11 o'clock. So what is it? It's a week-long professional development at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. It's sponsored by the University of Texas Center for Space Research. That is their space grant consortium. They just have a different name for it. We have one here in Virginia called the Virginia Space Grant. Montana has the Montana Space Grant. Every state has some kind of NASA equivalent. So participants attend presentations by NASA scientists and engineers, tour NASA facilities, get a look behind the scenes of different facilities that ordinary people don't get to see. One of the coolest ones in here I'll tell you about, it was really staggering. Receive hands-on inquiry-based learning assignments. We all had to submit a lesson, even me, even though I got picked late, I still had to submit it. And we got access to all each other's lessons and how to teach them and all the materials we need. So I went in and came out with 55 pre-made lessons for math, science, technology, and engineering. First thing, didn't even have to go to the conference yet. They sent it to us right after that. So it was staggering, the amount of resources they just throw at you. So who is Virginia Space Grant Consortium? The advisory board is several major colleges, Hampton University, UC Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, of course, William & Mary, UVA. I believe Radford is also part of the BLAST program, but not a part of the advisory board. Don't quote me on that. But it's a huge group where they work together to engage students and teachers in STEM. And that's their whole goal, is how to get it out into the public. They do all these awesome activities and opportunities for our students and staff. We have a long week. We start at 7, end at 10 most days. Certification, not everyone got to do this. You had to do a special application to do it. 35 teachers out of 35 got to do this, which is why you have the moon samples that you had passed in front of you. We did features. They made special graphics that moved. It had our names on them. It was all really high-tech and pretty. We did rocket launches and wind tunnels. It was phenomenal. We did OSIRIS-REx. This is the one I was talking about that kind of stuck with me. We were 7 inches from the samples, most of the samples. The public side, you only see a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter piece under 3 layers of glass glued to a pedestal. It was just the difference in what the public get to see and what we got to see. I'll talk more about that later too. The mock-up of the ISS, full size, where they have everything staged as it is on the ISS. Astronauts train in it to know where things are. There is a wall where famous people sign. If you're famous enough to come, if you ask and you're not famous enough to sign it, they will tell you no. You can't sign our wall, I'm sorry. I know Obama signed it. I'm pretty sure the vice president a few years back signed it. It's just a big giant wall. Lunar Laboratory, I was that far that you see that picture in the top corner is how far I was from rocks from the moon, which is staggering to think about how far they've come to be there. So, and this is the meteorite samples. The meteorite I'm holding here is older than our planet, which was staggering to think about. This rock I had that weighed 15 pounds was older than our planet. Our planet didn't exist when this rock formed together in the middle of a planet and then got blown up. So it was just awe-inspiring. I met Fred Hayes from Apollo 13. If you've ever seen the movie, he was played by Bill Paxton, and he did not like Bill Paxton playing him. He was very vocal about it. Phenomenal national hero. I sat 10 feet from him, had lunch next to him 1 seat away, and he quotes, "I was not a good student. I put frogs in girls' hairs." So it was amazing to hear him talk about his mission and what he did. I met astronaut Dan Tanney, phenomenal individual as well, funny. The meals you passed out, I passed out, you saw that he gave me reviews on all of them. Rice pilaf is his favorite. He does not like the potato soup. He said it's too chunky. So how do you apply? This is where I really want to get in the meat of it. There's a whole process. Virginia Space Grant has a place for you to apply, but that's not the only thing you can apply for. So yes, this is an amazing opportunity. Montana here has the same situation, but Plant the Moon Challenge is something our students do. My students did it last year. They take regular, actual moon simulant and have to grow plants in it and think about experimentations to grow those plants. Each of my students at the end of the semester got to take home a vial of moon dirt and put on their shelf. Just things that you don't think about as an educator that have the impact you do. I had kids like freaking out and showing their friends and running around. And I relatedly thought I'll just get these kids all glass bottles with dust in them. Oh no. But just to see their reactions, to have kids come and tell me now, that was the most fun I ever had. And I was like, really? You hated it when it was in school, man. The reports, the things you had to do. He goes, yeah, but it was really cool. I got to plant like a seed in moon dirt. Like, how many kids can say that? And I want every kid in Montgomery County to say that because it was such a huge opportunity. Virginia Space Grant will sponsor you to do this program. All you have to do is apply. You get the bag of dirt, which I think is like $700 for free. You do the program, they pay for it. For our students, there are opportunities like Virginia Space Coast Scholars. In sophomore year, they can spend a week at a NASA facility with engineers. They can experience current STEM and how it interacts with our students and how it interacts with their lives and how it interacts with current missions. BLAST is another one that happens for 8th and 9th graders. I actually met Lucinda, Mr. Chewbacca's daughter, at BLAST at Radford this summer. And I said, oh, I know your dad. And she goes, everyone knows my dad. Please stop. So she's a wonderful girl. I love meeting her and get to know her. But we only had 2 kids from Montgomery County in the BLAST program for the Radford, which was distressing because Radford's 15 minutes away. So I would love to see all of our 8th graders applying for it. You hit colleges at ODU. They get a weekend, they get half a week free. So they go in, and all these programs are free. The students pay nothing. They just have to get there, and that's all they ask of them. And I want to close with Pathways and VAST Invest. VAST is an online curriculum for seniors and sophomore and seniors where it culminates in a week-long trip to a NASA facility. And VEST is 2 weeks in the summer. Both awesome opportunities. The last one is Pathways. If our students decide to go to ODU, they can't do it before then because Pathways starts at 16, but we don't live near enough to a base. But if they go to ODU, they can apply to Pathways. When they finish their degree, if they finish with all the criteria, they graduate after doing 4 years of internship at NASA with a full NASA career. No application necessary, no additional paperwork, no clearances. They graduate with a full public service job at NASA, which is staggering. The amount of opportunity this offers students that people don't know about. I think that's the big thing is what I wanted to spend today was telling people there are awesome opportunities out there for us to apply for. We just have to look for them. I would have never have gotten this opportunity I had if I hadn't applied to a single thing 2 years ago. I did it on whim. So just go out there, apply. They're waiting for teachers to apply. They want you to. This next year, they're doing a bringing CTE, space to CTE middle school classrooms next year. The same thing I started in and got to know everyone and got all these opportunities from next summer. So I know Mary Sandy and Virginia Space Grant will be searching very highly for CTE teachers in Virginia to attend this 2-week program. So thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry I kind of went over. Have a good day. Where should I get my samples, though? I have to have those back.
Thank you, Mr. Ashby. Board, any questions, comments?
So my grandson attended 2 NASA camps during the summer, and he just loved it. And all those little things that you want back, anything he got, it was, this is my NASA stuff, and you knew, he was excited about that.
It has a mystical quality that, like most organizations have, especially in this region. We don't have the opportunities that they have in Norfolk and Hampton Roads and Wallops, so we have to really hunt for them. And it has the same effect. When I walked into the Blacksburg classroom today and I said, these are rocks on the moon, you could see like this almost like palpable change in kids. Yeah, they're still 8th graders, still gonna joke and make, can I lick it? But like there's this almost deference for it that you just don't see with most subjects. Like I teach robotics, and the robotics all last about 10 minutes, and then like, okay, whatever. I had kids for 30 minutes sitting in quiet rapture about moon rocks, which they don't even care about rocks. For them, most of them, it's just rocks. But the fact that it was NASA's moon rocks made a big difference to them. So you're exactly right. It just has this different effect on them.
Any other questions or comments?
I don't have a question, but thank you. I love to see your excitement and your passion. That's wonderful.
It comes out, like I said, 2 years ago, it was not as,
Right.
it wasn't peaking, and I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm thrilled to see it. Thank you.
So thank you. I can't imagine that this wouldn't be of many interest to many of our students now up and coming. I'm not sure if part of the reasoning behind you not seeing as many may be because it's just not getting out there or not known, but we can
That's
certainly
100%
work
what
on
it
that.
is.
Because I can tell you, I wasn't even aware of what you were talking about at Radford just now. So I don't know if those opportunities aren't being, the communication about them's just not getting out there, but maybe we can find a way to do better with that as well, and hopefully get more people and kids interested. Absolutely.
I actually spent the day today at Blacksburg Middle School, meeting every classroom, and part of my presentation was about the opportunities at Blast for middle school students. I'm going to Shawsville, Christiansburg Middle School tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'll be there all day.
Yeah,
hopefully
that would be great.
Getting the word out, so.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for
Appreciate
the
it.
opportunity.
More practically, Mr. Ashby, are all the opportunities that you talked about like hyperlinked from your presentation
I
here,
can
or do you
I
have-
can actually submit something. I didn't hyperlink. I originally had them hyperlinked, and then I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about. Like every good teacher, the more I sat and thought about what I wanted to do, the more my presentation changed. And by the time I got to the point where I had to submit it for the board, it was not like I had what I wanted, and then by the time I got here, it was completely changed from what I originally wanted to talk about. So, but I would be happy to provide links and have it on a place for the website people can access. So,
That would be great for just helping to let people know all these different opportunities.
absolutely.
Your palpable excitement is just wonderful to see, and thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
My question and comment is going to be the same as Ms. Pardon, like what can we do to help get this out there, right? I mean, get it in Peach Jar, get it sent out to the science teachers. It's opportunities here for teachers and for students, if I'm correct,
Absolutely.
right? So
That's absolutely correct.
we gotta get the word out there.
So I don't want to be the only one that has moon rocks from NASA. I want us to be fighting over them every year. So that'd be great. So thank you again so much.
Board,
for your
anything
time.
else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Dr. Bernie Bragan, our superintendent, will present a first read regarding a hate speech policy.
Hopefully everyone did get a chance to look at that. I did share that with everyone, right? Or is on board docs. So in a conversation we had a little while ago, we were talking about a few board meetings ago about having some specific policies related to hate speech, and that our code of conduct as it was written, and we had some parameters around verbal abuse and things like that we didn't think that was sufficient. So with the team, we put together something we thought was worthy of discussion to share with the school board, get your feedback. We heard some feedback from some community members. We'll take all that feedback. And this is just a first read, a rough iteration of something that we thought to put in front of all of you and get your thoughts. So that was our goal, to give some specificity on what hate speech meant and even some specific terms, and then specific consequences for different things. We did look at some other policies that were out there throughout Virginia and took some of those. And there was one from Massachusetts we took too that had some proactive stuff in there. And what you see on the board docs is what we came up with. So I'll open it up now to discussion or input.
Board, who wants to start?
I guess we can go down the line.
Sure.
Just go ahead and start. First, I want to thank you, Superintendent Bragan, for bringing this so quickly to the school board. I took notes on the document, and I don't know what's the best way to relay those. I can send them to you. I'm glad we're doing this. I'd like to see a lot more specific. I don't want it to be a long, overburdensome policy, but given some of the complexity, I do think that we need more specificity on even like definition. For instance, you know, there are a lot of things that people could find offensive, and so it could be anything from, you know, someone wears a T-shirt that has a Bible verse on it, and somebody could find that offensive. On the other side, someone, or not even, I shouldn't say on the other side, but someone could be wearing a Pride T-shirt, and someone could find that offensive. And so I suggest something about definitions to get at intent. There's very specific attention to discipline, the focus on suspension. I'd really like to see more of the mentoring and supports that are in there. I'll send you the list. I'd like to hear from fellow board members. Yeah, also with there are several mentions in here to the restorative justice practices. That's another thing where I'm like, what does that mean? Now, I know some of what that means, but somebody reading a policy document should know what that means in terms of the policy. So that's just like one example where I was like, it's not, I know it wasn't put in there as like a buzzword to sound good, but it's kind of at odds with the focus on suspension and out of school suspension. So I think it just needs more detail in various areas.
Okay. But to get you, you'll share that document with
Yeah.
me?
Yep.
Okay.
Ms. Pardon?
So, and forgive me, Dr. Bragan, if I've overlooked it in the policy. I think currently, over the years, we have had different departments handle disciplinary actions and issues. So if the hate speech policy is passed and does go through when we vote on it, do we currently know who will be handling those inquiries? And I would like to think that there would be a specific department that would be handling that instead of maybe principals having information in this, because I personally would like to see some hard data on it, because I know it has become such an issue and has apparently gotten worse over the years. So I would like it to be easy for whoever this falls upon. I'm going to assume possibly the equity department. I'm not sure if that would be their duty or not, but something easy to provide us data to see where we're having the issues possibly, and just to kind of reel it into one department having full control over it instead of kind of having the data spread around. I know in the past, we've had issues with certainly disciplinary things being handled one way, different departments handling it another way, and even to the point where different schools were handling disciplinary issues differently. So we need to make sure on this that we're across the board at all the schools to be fair, and that our administration knows that it all needs to be handled the same. I would like to see that. I don't know if that has to be stated in the policy, but I'd like to see that done. And I'm going to agree with Dr. Guitry on the fact that and we did have a public speaker tonight bring up the fact that I do believe it is a little broad for me because so you have a factual definition, and then you have what is the legal definition of something that offends someone. Again, we could be opening up, well, this word's not in the policies, so, but it offends me, and if it offends me, shouldn't it be in there, and that type of thing, and what offends one person and what offends another is so drastically different. It's just very broad terms, or someone who is insulted by something, as Dr. Guitry stated, and didn't know if there was going to be a way for that to be reported anonymously, or if that needed to be done, proven. I wasn't sure how we were going to, if we got into a situation to where if it had to be investigated, which I'm assuming that all disciplinary action is investigated before we can technically do anything. But we need to have a way to make sure that we can have factual information, and what happens if we can't prove something that's stated. That was kind of a concern to me as well. I don't know how that's, and I may be jumping way down too deep right now because I know we still have to have it looked over by our legal team and have some things discussed. But those were just a couple of things that jumped out at me, as well as are we going to account these offenses as, are they going to be repeat offenses, considering, because right now I think what we're doing with most of our disciplinary action is that it is continuous counts, meaning from, I do believe, secondary from 6 to 12. So is it going to be counted as actions within a calendar year, or is it going to be actions taken within years as you progress? Like, so what happens one year, is that year going to count towards if you do something again the next year? So just some things like that, just for some thought.
Really great questions. I don't have all those answers now, but I think that's,
I was just trying to come up with
so those are the things we got to look at. And I think with any policy, if you want to determine its effectiveness, you have to have some degree of accountability. And did it help change behavior, right? We all want a school where everybody feels safe, comfortable to be themselves, and where they can become all they're capable of becoming. And in order to do that, you can't have hate speech being present, right? So reductions moving forward and how that changes after implementation of the policy, but more importantly, the practices that we do in school, right, to help change what may be taking place. And there needs to be some way for us to report that out to all of you and to our community.
Right. And I don't want to take any more time. I'm sorry, I'm speaking way over my time frame, but I do, just in case, to remind our community or the people who may not have children in school, we have always taken this seriously, and we do already have a policy in place that states a good majority of this, and I just want to put that out there to make everyone aware that I know it seems like it has gotten worse, but we have always never tolerated any kind of hate, what would be considered hate speech, or, to any of our students, to where anyone should feel offended, to where they couldn't feel like that they could report it, and, there be disciplinary action. So I just want to make sure that the community is aware that we have always had a policy that has kind of covered that. So this isn't something that we're just now starting, so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bond?
Well, I'm prepared to vote yes to get any kind of ball rolling on what we needed to do. As Dr. Bragan said, you've got to kind of start somewhere, but I actually did agree with the speaker this evening too about not moving too fastly, being more direct about small and making a strong movement toward small steps the main important issues that we were talking about. But again, if we've got to start somewhere, this is a place to start for me. So.
Thank you. Ms. Purcell?
Thank you, Dr. Bragan, for getting started on this. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion as a community. And honestly, the way that you sent out the call for communities to be contributing to some of the school renovations, obviously on a different level, I would be really interested to hear. I know we've had some students come to public comment, but to maybe have some focus groups or groups of students and faculty give some of their perspectives and concerns. I agree that some more specific definitions and tiers of things, so that a word that is hurled at me because of my protected class is different than because if Dr. Roundtree doesn't like that I'm a Swiftie and we just have this like disagreement with each other. But, you know, hate speech doesn't contribute anything of value. So I think that's kind of where you get a way to make that part more specific. It's not a discussion. It's not a disagreement. It's harassment. So, yeah, thank you so much, and I'll pass it along.
Chair Linwood, could I add something too? I wasn't thinking on my comment. I would like to see, and I've mentioned this many times when we've on this subject, music that also has speech of that nature in it. I think we have so many students that listen to music that have hate speech words in the music, and I just don't think that's appropriate at all. So I would like to see that added. I mean, it doesn't have to be on one board member, but for me, I would like to see that added.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yeah, so thank you for getting the ball rolling here. There's a couple things I'd like to see added to start some training of students and staff at the beginning of school years documented in the policy as to aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, preferably by our DEI office, going around to each school. Also, I'd ask, what are we trying to accomplish with a hate speech policy? And in my opinion, hate speech is intended to dehumanize somebody to at the level that people don't have to look at them as a human anymore, and then they can treat them any way they want. There are specific terms, words for people of color, women, other protected classes that target the dehumanization of people so that you can then abuse them. And in my opinion is that is what we should be calling out here specifically. And our student conduct policies cover most everything else. As for the offenses, I know there's a lot of people that throw these words around that aren't necessarily trying to dehumanize people, but they just use the words because they're popular in culture. And I would really like to see more education on the repercussions of using those words. Saturday detentions, make kids go to school more, make them write reports on it, and various other aspects of educating people why these words should not be used. First, second offenses, probably third offenses, something to that order, and then start expelling or start suspending and further disciplinary actions that are beyond additional education.
Ms. Franklin. Key your mic. Thanks.
I want to thank the board for understanding that this is something we need to take action on, action that's going to be in policy, and for me, a lot more detail, and for the superintendent for, again, getting this to us so quickly. So some of the concerns I have are the staffing. Who is going to be doing this? We can't pile everything on our equity and diversity department because that's just not realistic. This has to be everyone in the district understanding it's your responsibility to call this out, to help to educate, and to correct this type of behavior. And, you know, we may say that we've had things in place for this, but if we had, and if it was working and doing what we think it's supposed to be doing, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but it doesn't. So unless we have tools that actually show the reporting, that it is in one place and not just mixed in with everything else, and it is reviewed on a constant basis. When we talk about wanting to see the data at this point, well, the issue is it's not being reported. It's not being dealt with, especially on a consistent basis across the district. And the fact that we have adults in the building who many of them have gone through implicit bias development and diversity and all this stuff throughout the years, and they still don't understand what their responsibility is, that's a huge problem. And it's education that's going to help that, and a commitment. What happens if we have adults who are not doing what they're supposed to do when it's reported to them, or when they overhear, or when they see hate speech or emblems of hate? If they're not reporting this, we're going to be having this conversation just like we've been having it over and over again for years. And it needs to stop. So it may be that we don't want to see a policy that just, you know, explodes, but there needs to be some very detailed specificity as to what happens and who's responsible for it, even to the point of the budget, and having people in place within the buildings who it is their responsibility. With our diversity leads that we had, our equity leads that we had, there was a stipend given to folks. And part of that, these people need to be chosen by, as far as I'm concerned, the students in the building. They need to speak to who they trust and who they believe is going to be looking out for them. And not just someone who says, I'll do it, and then, you know, I won't use the word, but just halfway does it, okay? Because that goes back to students and the adults and parents saying, well, nothing's gonna change, so why should I even bother with reporting or anything else, because nobody does anything. That is what happens all the time. That's what you hear from the students repeatedly. So when it comes time to saying how and who, it needs to be very specific. Having students engaged in this is key. You know, I have told students, unless you are participating, unless you are reporting, unless you are tracking what actually happens, and then reporting it if it doesn't happen, that leaves a big hole. So this is the responsibility of everyone. As far as the music, there's a lot of music out there, and I don't know, other than that they can't use their cell phones, that we can we can monitor what the students are listening to, and yeah, all types of music has some crazy stuff in it. Again, the accountability piece is huge. We've got to drill that down to who's going to do it. It has to be a separate reporting tool that is used for that. And quite frankly, it should be visible to the community so the community can see, yes, we're checking this off. It's being done, because it's not happening now. And so I spoke about our staff. You know, when you read this, it says, students who believe they have been subject to or witnessed, and when it comes to staff, it just says, when they've been made aware. I don't know, does that mean if they've heard it, or someone has to make them aware that something has happened, and then they act, or are they supposed to act when they hear it and see it? I believe absolutely yes. The anonymous reporting, that needs to be very clear where to go to do that and how to do that and who's going to be monitoring that from building to building, from district-wide. We have to be very specific. The restorative justice practices, you know, when I first read this, it's like, okay, yeah, we're giving these kids in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension at certain levels, but why do we even need to get to that spot with all of the children who may, again, not understand even how offensive what they are saying or doing is? It's education. I know when the Confederate flag piece came in front of us, and when it was determined we were going to not allow that, it was, okay, but we got to back off and we've got to educate folks, and I wasn't happy with that. But as far as I'm concerned, this is much, much more than that, and education is key. If all you've ever heard is this, and the reasons why you say it is incorrect, folks need to be educated, whether they believe it or not. When you come into our buildings, it's not going to be tolerated. And unless we do this the right way, now, starting small, I can see how that can be effective, but if I'm one of the people who is not being addressed because we're starting small, how long do I have to wait before I get my concerns, my feelings, my ability to focus on what I'm supposed to be here doing is to learn? How long do I have to wait till it's my turn? You know, so I think this is a lot of conversation, but there are key things that can be done right now. That is deciding how it's going to be reported, who it's going to be reported to, and who is going to hold folks accountable to take action on what's going on. Sending kids out of school, we have enough of that already. This is a time to help educate our students if they've gotten to the level where, okay, we need to send a big message. We're sending you to in-school suspension. For an out-of-school suspension, I would hate to understand where a child or an adult is at, that we have done everything we can and they still refuse to speak to people or refer to people in ways that are not respectful. Again, I am so thankful that this is in front of us, and I really appreciate all the community input that we have received and folks coming to speak, because it is something that needs to stop. And again, I appreciate you all supporting these efforts, but we've got a lot more work we have to do as far as, because it's going to cost some money unless we put people in place to do this. And it can't be on top of everything else that you're doing, at least not for the beginning of this, to make sure everything that we're saying, this time, everything that we're saying is going to be happening.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin. Let me pile on a couple comments here and we can, yeah. Go ahead.
One thing I would like to say is I like the idea of the anonymous tip line a lot, or a tip line in general. It doesn't have to be anonymous. Coming from Eastmont, we do have a lesser amount of diversity than other schools, and I think that it's a lot easier to kind of be singled out and kind of figured out who has said what and everything, and that can cause a lot of problems, especially for the person that reports it. So I think an anonymous tip line or just like a Google form that can be typed out and like a choice or not to put your name or not, but advise students like if you want a change to occur, you might have to express a little more of what's going on in your situation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's a great perspective. Just to pile on a couple comments, and we can keep going around if we need to. I really appreciate Ms. Franklin's comments because I've been grappling with this because, got a lot of great feedback and we've heard a lot of stuff tonight. And like, this is an area where like, I would love to change the world, right? Change the mindset, to change, build a community. A lot of great speakers tonight spoke to that. This is a hard problem, right? And we don't control what happens when the students leave our buildings, and we don't control every minute of their day, right? So, I was thinking about the comment from one of the speakers about starting small and trying to make progress there, but I definitely agree starting small shouldn't be excluding folks who need this protection, right? I think starting small, in my mind, as I'm thinking through this, is being more specific, being more intentional about what we're trying to do, like not trying to boil the ocean on every single possible method of discipline and all the different stuff. But, and to me, it starts with being specific about what it is that we're talking about, right? So I know in the comments we got a lot of suggestions. One of our board members sent a suggestion about more specific language about what it is we're talking about. So as opposed to words like insult and what was the other word? Offend. Insult and offend, right? Which a lot of things could do that, being called a Swiftie or not, right? But, talking about things that are degrading, that are dehumanizing, that vilify, humiliate, incite hatred against, right? I mean, stronger words so that we can hopefully cut through some of the First Amendment kind of concerns. I'm just expressing my opinion, right? Versus I am trying to dehumanize you for whatever reason. I think that's a great first step. But I know you've gotten a lot of feedback already from emails and from our comments, from public address. We'll get legal feedback as well. I think definitely appreciate all the efforts by the administration to try to pull something together. I mean, I would imagine I've been in your shoes, but starting a policy from scratch is not easy, right? It's one thing to amend it based on incremental changes or legislative actions, but we're building a new policy here, a policy that not many districts have, right? So it's not easy. Definitely appreciate all the hard work into this, and hopefully get some good feedback to go into that. All right. Any other board members with any other comments? Any student reps with any other comments? Sure.
So Christiansburg Institute has actually developed a curriculum that can be taught, and they are an excellent resource to help with the education piece of this. And the interns who are working with them, those young people, many of them spoke, they truly understand from coming from the buildings and then going to CI in their offices and in their museum, and them getting a much deeper understanding of the history and the contributions, and why the N-word is so offensive, because there's a lot of young people who don't understand the offense that's there until you explain it to them, and then they get it. But that is an excellent resource who have come and said, we want to help. And to do this, it's going to take all the help we can get.
Just on that, I met with Mr. Sanchez and Ms. Sherman Lee about a week ago. We have another meeting scheduled, though. I agree with you. Great input, and it's a great resource in our community. Someone who's really passionate about not only the history of the Christiansburg Institute, but also about ending racism in the county. So that's a great idea. If what I heard from the school board is correct, going to take all the feedback. Dr. Guidry's going to email me that piece that he has, and we'll get the feedback from the board attorney, who's still reviewing this initial iteration, and then I'll share it back with all of you. Again, not for a second read, but for further discussion at the next meeting, if we can get it done by then. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, and just for clarity for the public, that means that we're not going to be voting on it next meeting. We'd be voting on it at some later time.
I think that's fair, right? This is something we want to discuss a little further before we bring something for a vote. Let's, work it out where it's exactly where we want it to be.
Yeah, but let's not end up dragging this out. And this also is a good time to communicate with our students that we want to hear from them. And it's time for them to get engaged in this process. How do we make the hate stop? Because they are the ones who are getting the brunt of it. Not to say that a lot of our staff gets it too. And the microaggression is a microaggression.
Dr. Bragan, a suggestion was made, potentially try to look at some kind of community input into this, like student-led input into this, just to kind of get their take as well. I don't know, again, I don't want to drag it out, but it would be smart to get their take on this.
What makes sense on the surface, just hearing it, would be to bring it to the high school leadership and have them get committees in their buildings to get feedback. I think if we put it out too broad, like, hey, everybody, a survey, I don't think we're going to get the feedback we want. That's my 2 cents right now, but we could think about that more moving forward.
I like that we're doing it in a vacuum at least, right? Yeah,
So the one thing that concerns me with that is that we will get different comments from different schools depending on their level of diversity or just the area, and that we're gonna honor all the voices. But one of the most powerful things that have happened in this district since I have been on this board is when we bring students together from across the county to have these conversations, to come to some kind of understanding as this is what we think will work, and not just this building, that building. Yeah, we all have our own communities, but this is a district-wide effort, and I think bringing students together from across the district would be powerful.
Okay, good point.
Board, any other comments?
I'll just add a couple of things. First, I do want to thank the community for writing such thoughtful emails and sending along suggestions and materials. One of the things that I noticed, so it's not all by email that I'm doing this, is that there's an onus that's put on the member of a minority population or somebody who's the target. And I agree that there needs to be, I know that some districts will lay out what the responsibilities of staff are and what they're required to do, so that the responsibility is spread beyond just the person who is the target of it, and also to speak to the kind of the larger climate. So that's something that I would really like to see. And then another thing that came to my mind, and this does speak a little bit to the free speech concerns of some people, is that by using such broad language, there could be a student in a classroom who is being taught about the history of slavery and thinks, that makes them uncomfortable. And so, I think I agree that we don't want to make it overly complex, so it's good to have a small start, but at the same time, there's some really thorny issues here, and I'd like to see them addressed. But again, I thank everyone for their feedback, and I look forward to a revised draft.
So I have to follow up with that. When you say you're teaching the history of slavery and it makes someone uncomfortable, it should make everybody uncomfortable. But that's history. There's a lot of things in history besides just slavery that make me uncomfortable. So we need to teach what we need to teach.
Okay, board, anything else? Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, next up, our wellness policy revisions were brought before the board for a first read on August 20th. The only changes since that meeting are inclusion of page numbers and an updated web address on the final page. Policy is being brought back tonight for approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Dr. Browntree. Any discussion?
Yeah, I have some. And as have had each time, I do appreciate it is a very long, very extensive policy, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And there's many things in here that I do like and I do feel important. And I take our obesity problem in America very seriously. I've taken sessions. I've looked into it. I've battled the last couple of years with trying to shuck a few pounds myself. I get it. I understand completely. But there are some things in here that do concern me. One of them is just talking about the food sold outside of the school. I tried to write down some notes. The food sold outside of school meals, concessions, after school activities. There should be there's not supposed to be any logos, that's really going to hurt because we have donations, we have, coolers that might say Pepsi on it, and I'm just using that name broadly, or Dr. Pepper or whatever, or if donated things, that keeps that from happening. And that could really hurt a lot of concession type events. And then, I've spoke with some parents on how they feel with the different, and I understand their examples, and I understand it's ideals and examples of what you can bring, but when we start talking policy, people start thinking it's the law and it's how it's got to be. And I understand and I encourage health awareness, but some of the healthy snack and beverage ideas that are listed, those aren't something elementary students, a lot of them are very, very fond of. And in educational purposes are a whole lot of this, and I completely understand what I'm saying. But it's also a little difficult for parents to bring things like this in for a whole classroom. And we talk about having parent involvement, but yet we're making it difficult for that to happen. So I struggle with that. Like I said, I struggle with the food, and when I was talking about the healthy celebration and rewards, and I understand, we don't need to have food every time we celebrate something and reward something. I've shared that with myself, but as an adult, something's going to hurt me a lot quicker than it is a child. And I am a true believer that 2 small cookies once every month or school lunches is not what is making our obesity problem in America. And if we truly think that, then I believe, in my opinion, that we are mistaken. And I do believe when we adopted this 15 years ago, we saw what a disaster it became. And because it got too strict, and all it did was force students to get food elsewhere and outside of that. And parents were like, hey, they don't want to eat in the schools because they don't like it, or it became a huge negative effect, and I do not want this to happen, and I said that the last meeting as well. So if it stays this way, I'm going to be voting no, and it's not that I don't respect it. It's just, I just think that it could become, we're circling back around doing the same thing we did 12 or 15 years ago.
Okay, so I'm in agreement with Ms. Bond. She knows a little bit more about this than I do because she was actually on the board when the first one took place. But I've done some research and I've got my notes, and I read this policy at least 2 or 3 times just to make sure I wasn't missing anything, because it's a lot. And I believe I raised the question in the beginning about the concession stands and the logos and the cups because of what a price issue to the school it would be, or an expense. Let me rephrase that. So there's lots of pieces about the wellness policy that I love. There's lots of pieces in there that I totally agree with. But the part that I'm actually personally having an issue with falls under the food and beverage marketing section. And so I've got down scoreboards, message boards, menu boards, coolers, cups. These are enormous expenses that would be on us if all of those had to be paid for. And I wasn't real clear about, there's something in there about fundraising. I don't remember that from before, but it could just be because I overlooked it. I'm not really sure I'm understanding what the fundraising part is, because is this going to be, I know there won't be fundraising during the school day, I'm assuming, but is this going to be at like school events? Because the issue that I have with that is that if we're trying to fundraise with items such as food, possibly, or so that's but that's going to hurt. Wouldn't that hurt our do we not have, that's exempt from. Okay, no, so yeah, so no. So no, that's kind of talking on both sides. But you know, I like I said, and then there was a statement, immediate replacement of large items is not required. I didn't really kind of understand that statement. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. So there's a lot in this that I'm questioning, and if we want to go back and maybe revisit some items on it and maybe revise certain areas on it, I might be okay with it. But unfortunately, the way the state that it's now with what it states, like I said, there's a lot of good pieces in it, and I'm good with a lot of it, but there's a few things in there that I just do not feel comfortable with or agree about. So if it stays the current state that it is, I will be voting no.
Okay, let's keep going around. Dr. Guthrie? Any comments?
I'm going to reserve and continue, then if you could come back to me.
Passing.
I'll have something to say.
Ms. Franklin?
Don't worry about that.
So I hear you, Ms. Vaughn, and I've heard you for years, and I absolutely agree that what kids get in school is not causing obesity issues in this country. It was at the federal level when they changed what kids eat that affected school lunches and how kids were eating. And thank goodness some of that has been adjusted and our students are eating, because these are places, school is where some children get their meals for the day. The education piece of this also is make better choices. So it is extensive. And one of the things that I've learned throughout the years is our folks in our nutrition department understand this stuff inside and out. And I don't, and can't be in buildings constantly seeing what parents can't afford to bring to school because they want their child to be able to participate. So I hear you, but I got a more important policy I'm working on.
That's not fair.
Area.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes, I think for the most part, I'm all right with this policy, but one question I have is the rewards-based items. So we heard from one of our students earlier today that there were ice cream sandwiches at the end of the day for the last week of school. Is that allowed in this policy, or is that excluded?
Ice cream sandwiches are considered a smart snack. Mr. Garrettson, you want to elaborate on that? Because I asked that same question.
I don't have specific information about the ice cream snack at Christiansburg High School. I know Mr. Gwynn was very proud of his students and had shared with me a few days earlier that he wanted to do something nice for them. I do know that schools do have the opportunity to purchase some of their food items through the school nutrition program. Those would meet smart snack standards. I do not know if that's where he purchased the items for the students at Christiansburg High.
But just on that, Ms. Garrison, I do know about the ice cream sandwiches
sorry.
because I asked Michelle Knotts, who's in charge of our food service program, because the contract that we just signed with the new food service provider allows for a la carte items for them to sell, water bottles, other things like that, and ice cream sandwiches are one of those items.
Okay.
So I thought this may have been in conflict with that agreement that we just signed. So we had a long conversation about it, and many of those things that we would perceive that we sell as a la carte items at lunch that are not necessarily healthy were considered under this federal government as smart snacks, and ice cream sandwiches were one. I don't know if the specific ones that Mr. Gwynn got were the same ones.
Yes, sir. So they would be okay under this policy if they're purchased through the nutrition program.
Correct,
that we
or
have.
met those standards, what would be considered a quote-unquote smart snack.
Okay. Yeah, because I know lots of schools have ice cream sandwiches on Fridays for classes with the best attendance and whatnot.
So one of the things, I'm sorry, Mr., that I have learned over the years is what we consider an ice cream sandwich that I'm buying at Kroger's is not the same ice cream sandwich that's coming through the nutrition program. Pizza, a lot of the foods that we look at and go, but it is formulated different. It has to go through government approval. The companies who sell to the school system have to be approved to be able to sell because they have met those standards with the modifications to the food. So, yeah, we should have Ms. Knott come and do a presentation about this because it's fascinating to me anyway.
Well, it's not a bad idea because in my mind, smart snacks, a carrot, an apple, piece of celery, right? As Ms. Franklin said, it's the way the foods are made. Percentage of fat contained, sugar, and other things that I don't want to sound ignorant because I don't know what the other things are, but.
And however, I do agree with that 100%. Just the healthy snack and beverage ideas, low-fat air pop popcorn with no added butter or salt, baked whole grain tortilla chips with salsa and bean dip. These are ideas for elementary schools. Low-fat cheese served with fruit or whole grain crackers. Hummus served with vegetable or whole grain crackers. So when you start getting into the weeds of the whole grain and things like that, and I understand, but it does change. And it does make things, all this kind of stuff, put that on the can't buy and get one free list, okay? Those are expensive items. And again, that goes into if you want parental involvement. Not everybody can do things like this for a whole classroom of students if they do a celebration for a birthday or for an outing or for a Valentine's Day party or things like that. And again, I don't know, speaking from a concession person who ran it for years for Christiansburg football, I know the money that is brought in to support that venue and how much we had to raise to buy helmets for safety and non-concussion for our football players, watering systems, things like that. Those concessions is what paid for after meals for the football players at games. And, we slung some chili and some nachos and some hot dogs and you sell what you can to make the money and, chips and a 3-ounce bag of chips, I'm sorry, again, I don't believe that's what's making our obesity problem. It's eating a big bag, and that's not what we're selling at concession stands. And I'm afraid that these limitations are going to limit that kind of productivity for our sports or any extra activity, you know.
Mr. Garrison, I'm kind of cutting in line here, but I do want to piggyback on that. Sorry, Ms. Pardon.
It's okay.
But I do want to clarify that, though, because that was kind of my biggest question. Yeah. Are athletic concession stands impacted by this as well? Because those are after school, independent, outside of school hours, right?
I guess there are two pieces. The first piece I would share is very much the local school wellness policy is meant to be goals or aspirations, right? There's not a wellness police that's going to come in and get us. Every 3 years we do a triennial self-audit. Even with that self-audit, when you come forward with shortcomings and say, well, we missed this mark or we didn't hit this goal, you're still not necessarily in trouble. And I will say, as an administrator, at the building level, when the first wellness policy came out and moving on up to now, I do think I've seen a difference in terms of us being a little more thoughtful, a little more diverse in choices we offer. I think as long as there's birthdays, there are going to be some cupcakes at school. I believe that happens. To Ms. Bond's point, I don't think the world is going to stop turning because of that. But I do think now when you go into a school for like a party or an activity or a school dance, you probably will see some carrot trays and some ranch and those kinds of things, along with all the other things we've always had. I think if you go to a prom, you're going to see some of the chicken nuggets and some cookies and some cake, but you're going to see some vegetables and some fruits as well. I think it represents moving forward and being a little more considerate to where, to one of the board members' points, we don't need to celebrate every single thing with donuts. We can do some other recognitions that do not have to be food-based, and that's a good example for our children, for our students, just in terms of saying at some point you're going to be an adult and you're going to make these decisions on your own. To the point that did get some conversation, I had 2 points, I'm sorry. The second point is Ms. Knotts was with us on this committee, and we raised some of the same concerns. Hey, what's happening at the concession stands? Hey, is this going to impact you in any way with your federal lunch program? Her answer was no, it does not. And to the question, I think that was asked last time we met as well. Hey, when and I'll just use any name, when Pepsi donates 500 cups, do we have to get rid of those Pepsi cups? The truth of the matter is we could be serving Coke in those Pepsi cups, right? It's whatever's in the concession stand. We're not going to have to make those changes. We're not going to have to, turn away those items, because for us, my understanding in working with Ms. Knotts is that's just a donation. That's not us actively trying to promote Pepsi, because we may be serving their number one rival in that same cup. Certainly, the board can do as it may or do as it will. This is very much the stock draft policy from the state. We did try in multiple places to try to say these are options. These are broad goals. We really tried to include as many options as we could without painting ourselves in a corner. So it's not my intention, if the policy is approved, to be running around at school concession stands or elsewhere pointing out you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. But I do think in my experience over the years, I've seen a little bit of a change to where it's not just all cupcakes. And I do think to our students today, I think they probably eat much healthier than I did as a student. And we do have those students who look and think and say, I'm going to pass on the donut and I'm going to get something different. I'm going to drink water instead of a soda. So in some ways, I'm not saying that's, all attributed to a wellness policy, but I do think we're fostering and developing those thoughts in our students by putting some of this stuff forward and putting it in front of them and giving them some of those other choices. happy to answer any other
Great, thanks for that
questions.
clarification. I definitely appreciate that. I kind of jumped out of line. I apologize. Ms. Purcell? And we'll keep going around.
I mean, a lot of these, like the replacing of the logos, like the specific line under that subhead says, immediate replacement is not required, but as things age out, I guess, but then again, to your point, Mr. Garrettson, if you get a bunch of free cups from a particular major brand, we're not turning down something free that works. And the charts at the bottom of in the appendices, they're just suggestions.
Correct.
So if it's super hot and the kids need icy pops in May, that's not, the food police aren't on their way. I did look up the Smart Snacks food list that comes from the USDA, and among many other things, it includes Teddy Grahams and Pop-Tarts. So there's a range. So thank you, Mr. Garrettson.
Yes, ma'am.
Keep going around. Yeah, so let's go to our student reps.
Real quick, I just have 2 points. One, I know that we've discussed the concessions and stuff, and I don't know a lot about this policy, but I'm just going off of what I've gathered. So if I'm speaking completely out of turn, just tell me. But one thing I will say is I do 6 sports year round, and 5 of those do involve my school. Very small school. And so one thing I will say is that our booster club provides so much for after school activities, uniforms, anything like that, travel. They are the ones that really put in the time, forth, effort, and funding. And I don't want anything to be taken away from that program. As a small school as it is, we already have some issues funding as it is, and I think that we just need to be careful about how this is affecting that. And then 2, my sister is actually a nutritionist for the Roanoke Health Department, and I hear a lot about dietary nutrition, everything else like that, and I just wanted to discuss the obesity topic and everything, and if we are changing something like within the lunch or any after-school snacks or stuff like that. One thing I will say, if students don't like what they are eating, like to a point, they're not gonna eat. And one of the leading factors in obesity is overindulging, and you don't want them to sit there and not eat all day because something is hereforth disgusting, and then decide to go home and absolutely overindulge because they've been starving all day. But that's the only things I see though.
Great, thanks for that. Any other student comments?
So, like Asia said, I'm not too aware of this policy, so bringing back up that ice cream topic. So Mr. Gwen did decide to, treat our students for, we're coming up with this new cell phone policy. It's a hard thing for students to adapt to. So the way of rewarding them was with ice cream sandwiches. I understand that. I personally did not take an ice cream sandwich, but I do know there are friends who love the cafeteria ice cream that they provide, the sodas that they provide. So there was a mention of you guys switching nutrition plans. How does that fall into that new nutrition plan of it being allowed? Or as Dr. Bergen said, the smart or safety, how does that fall into it really?
Yeah, so any vendor that we would use for our school nutrition program, any company we would use, has to meet some federal guidelines to be able to operate in schools. So we did recently, at the beginning of this year, change vendors. So you've got a new vendor. So if things seem a little different from last year, it's probably in that change from one company to another. But either of those companies, and even a list of other vendors who are maybe trying to get our business, they all have to meet the federal guidelines for us to be able to receive some benefits in our school lunch program, to be able to provide free and reduced lunch to those students and basically be able to serve in cafeterias. Ms. Knotts, who we mentioned is kind of our lead central office person for managing that nutrition program. So we really are not able to put a company in place who doesn't meet the standard unless we're talking about backing out of the federal nutrition program, which essentially no public school would ever really want to consider to do. I hope that answered that.
Great question, students. Dr. Gitry, you ready?
Okay, I'm ready now. Two things. I'm a little ambivalent just because I've heard really negative feedback about our new vendor in the food and the cafeterias from some sources. I haven't done a broad survey, so they're going to continue to provide the food. So there's not like any accountability in there for that. But so I think though I can help a little bit with the concerns that were expressed, in that my understanding is that the issue with the logo and the fundraising and all that is direct competition with the nutrition program during school hours, right? So it's not about after-school fundraisers. It's not like, that's not what this is about. And some of this language is in the Code of Virginia. It's just a little clear. For instance, there's in chapter in C20 740-35, which is mentioned, it says each public school shall be permitted to conduct on the school campus during regular school hours no more than 30 school-sponsored fundraisers per year, during which food, et cetera, et cetera. That language is coming directly from the Code of Virginia. It's a little clearer there to make sure that people know this is to avoid direct competition with the food program during school hours for breakfast and lunch. This has nothing to do with fundraisers after school. Am I correct in understanding this?
That's my understanding in talking with Ms. Knotts, is that this would not impact concession stands specifically. That was a question our committee had. When we read the language, we saw the text, we essentially had the same concerns. And she said she did not believe this impacted the school nutrition program whatsoever.
Yeah, so even that language about the money, the proceeds from those food, that's only if there's direct competition and that goes into the program. So if there's not direct competition, whatever funds are raised through concessions goes to the purpose of raising those funds.
Yeah, we had some good conversations because, I mean, again, a lot of this work was done in our school health advisory board. There were some conversations about curtailing that number back, less than 30, or even some discussion about should we have any food fundraisers. But we have a few schools who do some fruit sales, particularly around the holidays. That would be considered a very healthy food fundraiser and really benefits those programs greatly. So in the end, again, our team just kind of said, hey, look, if we can avoid every school club selling candy bars, that's probably a good move. Let's sell some other things. Let's have the principal, and again, that's coming out of code. Let's have the leader of that building be responsible to keep up with the fundraisers, to try to use some wisdom, some discernment in what gets approved. And again, can our organizations generate funds to support their programs without it always having to be potentially maybe the worst possible item that we're selling. So again, these are all goals and intentions. If we do have situations where we're seeing lots and lots of candy bar sales, right? Then potentially there could be a conversation just saying, hey, school, are you really thinking about that? Like nobody's going to come in and shut them down or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you. So does that answer some of the concerns that you raised at the beginning with your remarks?
I think you're talking about, you may have been directing that to me, possibly. Because I asked about the fundraising and the concessions and stuff. Yeah.
I followed that. I've read this like 5 times today. So I completely get it. Thank you. I mean, but it's still, food advertising and marketing is defined as an oral, written, or graphic statement made for the purpose of promoting the sale of food. It doesn't say during the day, brand names, trademarks, logos, or tags. And I understand it. I've read all of it. It's, oh, you don't have to replace it now. And as things wear out, you can do it. And all of these are ideas. But again, I do remember what happened. They were all ideas. And it was like, oh, no, well, if you're going to help do this, you can't bring that. That's what my concern is, and I completely agree with you. We have definitely gotten misguided in a lot of things. You know, yeah, eating a whole box of donuts, yeah, that will get you. But you know what, one, periodically, it's not going to get you. You're exactly right. It's how much you eat. It's not always what you eat, and we've gotten so misguided over that type of thing, and that's my whole concern with this. Is the educational piece of it is sometimes, I don't know what the word for it is, that's where I'm concerned at. And I don't want to see us go down that slippery slope again by falling into those ideals. You know, it's the same thing with, I understand it's just an idea of meatless Monday. And that's great for those who don't like meat. But for those who do, well, that's not a great thing. So, and it's an idea, but it's not to me, I just think she hit the nail on the head. If you don't like this and it goes to that direction, you're not going to eat lunch here. You're not going to eat, you're going to wait and go fast food afterward. And that's exactly what happened. And I that's my concern. And we know it happened. So, you know, she hit the nail on the head. She really did. So, I'll shut up.
Okay, board, any other comments?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think my main concern right now is that it kind of sounds like, from what I'm hearing from others, it's like the explanations are not matching the wording of the policy, which can be an issue because it can be a problem because once it's a policy, well, the policy is considered the law, and you can't say this is just a suggestion if it's a policy, because if we put it in a policy, it's going to need to be followed. So if it's not stated correctly in the policy, then it needs to be rewritten and be more specific, adding in whatever verbiage needs to be there on that for me to be able to vote yes.
Okay, board, any other comments? Okay, we have a vote and a second on the floor. Let's wait for Dr. Roundtree to get back to us. Mike here. All right, great. Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
No.
Ms. Franklin?
Turn your mic on, Ms. Franklin, I'm sorry. Oh, no, they just turned it on. Again, you're good, you're good.
Okay. I was just turned the wrong way, so I'm going to vote no.
Dr. Gitchery?
Abstain.
Ms. Barton?
No.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Dr. Hudson?
Because we have an abstention, what happens if we have a tie? I'll vote yes.
3 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 abstain. The motion fails.
I think what would be helpful would be some more specificity, right? Because I appreciate what we heard in terms of the food police not showing up, shutting you down, right? But if I read this policy, there's some stronger statements in there than that, right? Yeah. Be my advice. Okay, next up, Dr. Tony Walker, our Director of Special Education, will present information on division supports for students with disabilities.
A point of order. Our student representatives, usually there's a time at which is now that time?
Yeah, but between 9 and 9:30, whenever they feel comfortable, they can go ahead and go if they'd like.
But we know you're so engaged, you don't want to leave, right?
Good evening, Chairman Hudson, board members, and Dr. Bragan. This evening, I'll be presenting division supports for students with disabilities. My agenda for this evening will cover the academic labs that are in process now. We're implementing those at this point. An RFP for in-person speech opportunities. And also, I'll be presenting a grow your own speech pathology proposal, which is currently in development as well. A little history on learning labs. Historically, we had learning labs at select school sites in the school division. Those learning labs were dissolved to bring teachers into the classroom settings because teachers were needed at that time, and also due to some implementation difficulties with those learning labs. Those programs, again, they provided intense instructional behavior supports for specific students, while again providing continued access to the general curriculum. So we have a need to bring those back at this point in time. Based on trends from the 23-24 school year, many students with disabilities had difficulty accessing the general curriculum, and they needed some safe spaces to go. Students with high intensity needs require specialized instruction, such as, again, to receive academic support for those students who need additional supports to be pulled from the classroom to receive that. Communication, de-escalation if they're having difficulty or periods of crisis. Regulation if they are dysregulated. And also ABA support, they can be scheduled by BCBAs to receive ABA support in academic labs. And also for social emotional behavioral interventions as well. Those are those school-based interventions within the school division. So sometimes they can happen as well in those academic labs, social skills, anything with the curriculum-based, as well. Also, skilled professionals provide behavioral support, again, when behavior escalates. Continuum of support services to meet academic students' needs. As you can see, we have the arrow pointing from the regular classroom, which is the least restrictive environment. If students have difficulty accessing that, then you move down the continuum, and you can see where academic lab is located. It is further down the continuum to most restrictive. The academic lab sites, we've got 9 academic lab sites, again, based on trends from last year, where we saw that there were students having difficulty accessing the general curriculum, behavioral suspensions, again, where there are certain disabilities, were either not understood or what training needed to take place. But again, based on the students' needs, we decided that these were the 9 areas that we saw based on the data that we were collecting during that year. These are also elementary, middle, and high school settings as well. The staffing for the academic lab consists of a special ed teacher, an RBT, which is a registered behavior technician or a behavior technician, and 2 paraprofessionals going in and out of the academic labs. And so here's how you access the academic lab. Let's say a student who has a difficulty participating 100% of the time in a general educational setting. The administrator submits a referral, to the BEST team, which is the Behavior Education and Support team. That team consists of board-certified behavior analysts, division special education personnel, And so what we do with that BEST team is make sure that the referrals are true referrals and that the schools who made the referral have attempted all interventions necessary to maintain students in the general educational setting. And so once those interventions have been exhausted, and then so that application is approved, and then the administrator calls the IEP team, and that team also meets and determines the actual length of time in the academic setting. Again, recommend the number of students in the academic lab are 6 to 8. And the reason for 6 to 8, because we want to make sure there's no overcrowding in the academic labs. The labs are at different sizes at different schools. The environment is a small group size, individualized instruction, and also, again, it's that LRE setting that we want to make sure that students are there who need to be there. The amount of time a student spends in the academic lab, again, is determined by the IEP team. And as you can see, where academic lab is. And so the goal is for students to, if they're having difficulty in the gen ed setting, they circle into the academic lab, we work with them there, and then they go back to the gen ed setting. So the goal is not to stay in the academic lab, it's to go to have your needs met and to be reintroduced back into the gen ed setting. My next area of discussion will be requests for proposals for before school, after school, and Saturday speech services. Currently, the division has 4 speech pathologists to provide services for students with IEPs. We've also contracted additional agencies to provide additional supports, 2 full-time virtual and 1 in-person through AMN. Through AIS, 2 full-time virtual, 1 part-time 15 hours in person with ProCare, and 1 part-time 20 hours in person with Reliant, all to meet the needs for the school division's speech services in the school division. To assist with providing additional in-person speech services, we develop an RFP for before school, after school, or during a Saturday speech clinic. This is to give options to parents to provide additional in-person speech. This RFP process will complete this Friday, September 6, 2024. The staffing process for these options are the special education department will use a rubric to review and score all proposals. All proposals are ranked based on the criteria of the RFP, and the director of finance will negotiate and award contracts after we provide those to her. Parents will be sent a letter with a description of the agencies that are selected to provide the in-person speech services. Parents will also be given an option to select the additional in-person speech services either before school, after school, or during a Saturday speech clinic. Parents will also be asked to contact their school's administrator, case manager, or the Department of Special Education if they decide to select an in-person speech option. Once parents choose an in-person speech option, their students will be moved from teletherapy services to in-person speech services, and those students will remain on the new speech pathologist caseload for the rest of the school year, unless the parents decide they want to move back to teletherapy. Transportation for these options are the before school option. Parents will transport students to speech in that morning, and then student attends school. The after school, students will take the all-in tutoring bus home at their drop-off location for transportation. And for the Saturday speech clinic, of course, parents will transport those students to and from speech session. The next area I'm going to talk about is Grow Your Own Speech proposal. This is currently in development as we speak. The goal for Grow Your Own is to increase the capacity of the school division's speech and language pathologists to deliver in-person speech and language services. Goal 2 is to establish a collaborative partnership with Bradford University's Speech and Language Department. And goal 3 is to develop a pathway for qualified division personnel to obtain a master's degree and licensure through Bradford University's Speech and Language Program. As you know, there's a nationwide shortage of speech pathologists that impacts the division's ability to provide in-service speech in-person speech service for students with disabilities. Again, the shortage of a speech pathologist has created a highly competitive atmosphere within the educational region. We're all fighting for the same small pool of speech pathologists. Again, the shortage has forced us to go through an RIP to provide different ways to provide in-person services for students with disabilities, as well as virtual speech pathologists as well. This is done in order to meet the IEPs of students, their service times in the IEPs, that we're obligated to do so. The process is we plan to collaborate with local stakeholders to enter into an MOU to grow our own qualified related speech services personnel to provide speech services to meet the needs of the students within the division. We plan to enter into funding agreements and with division personnel to complete the necessary coursework to leading to the master's degree and full licensure of speech pathology. Before the school division provides any funding for coursework, participating personnel will sign an agreement to be employed by the division for 5 consecutive school years. Each school year will equal to 20% proactive funding from the school division. Once an employee has been gainfully employed for 5 years after receiving the master's degree, they fulfill their obligation according to the agreement. However, if they separate from the school division, then they'll reimburse the school division for 20% each year not completed per the agreement. Selection of those participating in the program: those who have a bachelor's degree in communication, a master's degree, or a bachelor's degree in any related field of study may apply to be considered for the Grow Your Own program. All participants will participate in the program will make application to Radford University Speech and Language Program. Participants will have their transcripts evaluated by Radford University to see if they meet criteria for acceptance into the program. In addition to this process here, we also going to be looking to provide additional incentives for those speech pathologists to provide additional 2 years of service, beyond their current contracts. That ends my presentation. Any questions in relation to the 3 areas I've discussed this evening?
Well, thank you, Dr. Walker. Appreciate that. Board, who has questions or comments? Who wants to start?
Sure. So for the learning labs, will that give us any opportunity to bring students from Minnick or Rivermont, Gateway, or Virginia Institute of Autism back to the home schools?
Yes. The labs can be used as a step down from private day, also from Montgomery Central as well, for students transitioning back to the comprehensive school setting. They may access the lab at certain classes during the day for any type of social skills, any type of intervention that needs to be continued. And so as a way to transition smoothly back into the school setting.
And what percentage of those students do you expect will be able to transition back into their home school?
Again, everything is needs-based, based on the student. So it's based on the progress of the student. And so that's a hard one to, determine, as we follow students, as they return back to the school division. We'll probably start that, since we're starting the labs, we'll start collecting that data, and we'll be able to provide that data to you at a later date. I'll provide Dr. Brigman that information to you. So we'll be tracking those students entering and exiting the programs.
And how do we track those students in those alternate schools?
Into the alternate schools?
Yeah, when they're in the alternate schools, what is our tracking of their progress in the schools?
We have a current tracking system that we use where we have our alternative school specialist goes and visits our students at the school setting. She also makes sure that we provide, we conduct our IEPs as well. Progress reports are sent to us. Attendance is sent to us. And so based on those situations, we meet regularly with them as well, and to determine how students are doing. And when students are able to transition back, then we do a slow transition back. We have some students that are transitioning back from, matter of fact, from Gateway, students transitioning back this school year. So that student may access a certain lab if it's at that school. If not, then we look to determine what will best meet that student's needs.
Okay, thank you.
Going around. Ms. Franklin?
Okay, so with the transportation, so there's no transportation before school, no transportation for Saturday school. Why is that?
Saturday school, again, based on the number of students that showed interest, there could possibly be transportation for Saturday.
Okay. And what would that number be?
Again, I'll have to get back with you with that number. It's based on when we send the information to parents, we will look to see how many. And so I guess we will, determine 10 to 20, students, possibly, maybe less, maybe 15 or so. But again, we'll determine that, again, also the availability of the bus drivers as well, transporting as well.
Okay, so I'm just real concerned that if we have 5 students who need that extra support, but yet can't transport their child before school or on Saturdays, that we're not going to support them in the way they need.
We can look at each student on an individual basis, and so that's something that we can discuss and possibly bring that back to you, but we're going to look at each kid individually.
Okay. And the other, and I can't find the exact slide that talks about how many students are in the labs, 6 to 8?
Yeah, 6 to 8.
Even with the rotation with students, going through the lab, are we meeting all the students' needs that need the support?
You mean in the academic labs?
Right.
Yes, our BCBAs do monitor the academic labs. They also provide training to our, it'll be ongoing training all year to all of the staff in the academic labs, and to make sure that they have the up-to-date strategies. Also, I mentioned that there are students, that are scheduled into the labs. They're scheduled there to provide the necessary support for them to be able to be maintained in the lab, as well as those supports will be able to have them exit the lab and participate in the general educational setting. So we make sure we establish that continuity for any skills that are taught there.
Okay. So I understand that piece of it, but we only have so many hours in the day and so many days in school. Is that capacity meeting all of our students' needs?
Yes, those students who are in the lab, it does meet their needs. We do have a staffing ratio. Those students who have individual paraprofessionals with them, they come with them to the lab. And so there's extra support. We have two paraprofessionals that are stationed in the lab, again, the RBT and the teacher, but their individual paraprofessionals will come in as well to provide support to those students if needed. So the ratio of support is increased, based upon, that ratio.
Maybe I'm not phrasing this right. So if we've got a school day that's 4 hours, and we have 20 kids who need to go through that lab, and the school year is only 2 weeks, do we have the capability to service all those students that they're going to get? Every student's going to get their opportunity to go through for the same amount of time to meet their needs.
Yes, every student's needs, again, the IP team determines how much a student spends in the academic lab based on their IEP. We go off the IEP for those students entering the lab and exiting. So the team will make sure that the students are successful based on goals and objectives are developed. And so, again, it's need-based. So students aren't in there just to be in there all day, but it's based on their individual needs. Some students are there for an hour. That's all they need. Some there for 2 hours. That's all they need. And so when I mentioned students are scheduled in there, so we have students that are scheduled in there to work on ABA. They have to be scheduled. We didn't want to just put students in there with autism just to be entering there. We want to be meaningful to them. We want to do programming for those students. And so again, it's needs-based, so it's based on each individual student. So that's why the lab is designed to work with the student individually, so that way we can look at each kid individually, and so to meet their needs.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Guidry.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll just ask a few short questions. So I know that there's a category of students, and I am in favor of diversifying our programming and our services, certainly. I do have concerns about whether we have the resources to actually pull this off, because this is going to require more resources. And we've had a lot of turnover in special ed in our program, and I have real doubts about our ability to do this, to pull this off because of the intensity of the resources that are going to be necessary. But I know that there is a class of students with disabilities, and maybe you just answered this and I didn't quite catch it, who want to be in a general education setting, but there will be times in which they may need
Yes.
more intervention. Those students then are sent to the lab for, like, so let's say it's the middle of the day. Student's great, but then something happens, there's a crisis moment, are you sending them to the lab?
A student can access to lab, again, for crisis stabilization, as I mentioned on one of the slides. They can go for, if they're dysregulated, they can go to the lab to get regulated, and then they, once they're calmed down, settled down, regulated, and able to take direction and participate, then they're escorted with their paraprofessional back to the gen ed setting.
Okay, so let's say Harding, I have the closest connection to Harding because my boys went there. So you have a second grade student, let's just say second grade. If there is dysregulation in the middle of the day, somebody is going to drive that student to where? Where is that student going to be transported? Like a second, because if I'm understanding this correctly, they'd go to Christiansburg?
No, let me go back for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so these labs are school-based. They're school-specific. If there is a student that is at a school that does not have a lab,
right,
and that student needs support, then that student, we will look to see where is the closest school that has a lab for a student, and so then we will transport that student there to receive services. Or what we'll do is we will speak to that parent to say, hey, here's the closest lab that can meet the needs of the child, and so we will discuss it at that point in time. However, there is in the proposed on their slides are two links. One is a 2-year proposal. And so that calls for the first year for the 9 that are here, which we're discussing today. The second is for an academic lab for every school in a division. And so to answer your question, let's say if each school is going to have a lab next school year, that is the goal.
Okay.
But for this school year, is what you're saying is that, yes, we will look to address that student's need. And so we will look to talk to the parent to say, we may need to have a student move to this school to receive that support, if necessary. Or what we can do is we can look at that school to say, you've got a student that is having lots of difficulty accessing maybe 1 or 2, or 3, then we would like to see a lab at your school to support those students. The goal is to maintain students in their homeschool settings and not send them to private day schools. And so that's what the goal will be. So we'll look at each kid individually. So for instance, we did receive a call from a school who's saying, I would like to have a lab. I have 2 or 3 students that are having difficulty accessing, at this point. So we're going out to meet with that school, and then we're going to look and talk with that principal, and we're going to look at those kids' program, and then we're going to look at the school setting to see where can we place a lab in that building. The goal is to bring the supports to the student so that we won't have to bring the student outside of the school.
Okay, thank you. I have some more, but I'll let my colleagues continue.
Ms. Farden?
So One good thing about going last is a lot of my questions have already been asked. So I did have one thing I wanted to touch on, though, and you may have already said something about this, so I apologize if you have. So I know if we don't have the personnel and support there, we're sending out the RFPs to the places to help us with this.
Yes.
If for some reason we seem to have an issue with that as well, do we have anything that we're going to fall back on with that in per se? Or I didn't know if we had even thought about that yet.
Yes, we did 4 RFPs just for that reason.
Okay.
To make sure that, we didn't want to do one.
Okay.
Because then we had nothing to fall back on. So we have 4 out there. What we did was we did a blanket. We said we need an RFP for, to provide, RBT, OT, PT, speech, interpreting, whatever. So we make sure that we did that so that we can fall back on and have those individual, agencies as backup.
Okay. So we kind of overwent with the RFPs to make sure. I like that. Great. Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yes, I guess my questions would be, Dr. Guthrie kind of touched on this. I appreciate the mention of the link because I did miss that in the slides to the proposal. But my question is still, do we have the staff in place now to do this, even if just in the limited phase 1 approach? And if we don't, what's the ask, right? So in terms of budget for next year, right?
As per proposal, the budget for next year is to have an academic lab at each school, which requires, teachers to run the lab. And every student has a paraprofessional, so we're fine there. The RBTs, we work through grants as well to cover those as well. And so, for example, some schools this year, we did talk with principals, and they've identified teachers that they want to do the lab. And so we're trying every angle so that we can make sure that we are using all the resources that we have so that we can support students' needs at that point in time.
Okay. You're not wrong. Yeah, so I guess just to wrap up that thought, I mean, obviously as we get into budget season, that would be the time to start having those conversations. But it's not clear to me how much we're asking for, right? The difference between what we currently have and how much we need to do this. So we don't need that right now because we're
we're in phase 1 right now where we
budget.
have the 9. Phase 2 is for, if you look at the proposal, it calls for every school in the division to have a lab. We'll probably be looking to do something at that point for next year's budget, not this year, but the year after.
Okay, so again, I may have just missed it. So trying to be clear. So for phase 1, with the 9 schools that you mentioned, we have the staff for that already?
The staff are in the schools now. All the labs are running. They're up and running.
We've added some staff, though. We had an allocation of 5 additional staff members.
That's correct.
And for next year's proposal, rough ideas, we were talking just this morning, it's around 10 staff members.
10.
But we don't have that ironed out yet on what that would look like moving forward. Obviously, we didn't begin discussing budgets for next year at all.
Okay. Again, I think I missed a piece. I thought we were asking to start these labs, not that they were already happening. So these things are already going. They're already staffed.
Correct.
The stuff is being done.
Yes, they're staffed.
Not the first time.
They're running.
But that's cool.
Yes, sir.
That's great.
Dr. Walker's response was to some of the needs we had last year about some of our students' needs not being met without having some of this pull-out supportive services. So that's when they started looking at these academic labs. And initially, the number was smaller. And then as we went over IEPs, as Ms. Franklin had said, do we have enough to meet all the kids' needs, students' needs, as such that, so it expanded to the schools that are currently in there. And the same thing with the speech therapists. There's a shortage across the nation, but it's particularly germane to our area. There's just not a lot of people here. So we typically need 8 speech therapists. I believe we have 4 right now. Is that
we
right?
have 4. Yeah.
So one of the things you did was you contracted with telespeech therapy that provides, via the internet, via a Zoom call or Google Classroom, which is okay, but it's not the best type of service. Would much rather have one-to-one. So Dr. Walker put out some RFPs offering that one-to-one service for people before or after school. So that could be our own people. It could be other people that are providing it at different schools or something like that so we can get the services for the students. The problem is then the students have to stay either after school, before school, or on Saturday. And there's logistical concerns with that, as Ms. Franklin said, and Dr. Walker and I were talking. If we need to adjust transportation, we'll do that, but it may not be conducive if we have 1 or 2 students at each elementary school to transport, right? So that may mean we have to have a hub somewhere where there's one school that has 7, 8, 9 kids, and we're going to try our best to work all that out. But we're not sure at this point that students are committed and parents to coming on Saturday. We don't know that, and we're just doing our best to try to mitigate a bad situation. One of the other things Dr. Walker alluded to is we're looking at a sign-on bonus and a retention bonus. You know, we just to get people, and then if they are going to get that bonus, they're going to commit to be here for at least 2 years. So we're trying to do all we can to address that concern.
Okay, great. Chriselle?
Some of my question, I think Dr. Bragan just addressed with that clarification about the speech pathologist program and just addressing the need. How many students qualify for speech service support in the division?
For the total number of students, that is roughly around, I would say we've got about 400 students plus. I can get you that current exact information. We're about to do screenings this year. That number is definitely going to change. So I can provide the exact information with Dr. Bragan to give to you at this point.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yes.
Because I know that the 4 full-time speech pathologists are extremely overloaded in their schedules and are kind of asked to work miracles to try to provide adequate services for the students that need them. And I know that if a child is identified as needing speech support before they're age appropriate for kindergarten, they can start doing that younger also. Is that correct?
Yeah, preschool, yes.
So is that like age 3, 4? Does
Yes.
it kind of depend? And I guess where I was just a little unclear, and I apologize if I was the only one that didn't quite get this. The RFP is for additional supports, but then is the intention that the extra time that is in person replaces the online?
Yes.
Because it just is probably very hard to do that well, especially for younger children. How many children are needing to do online therapy right now?
Let me get the exact number to you because that number shifts
Sure.
As students come in and out. And so if I tell you a number today,
I understand.
by the time I get home, that number is going to change. And so because we have the system roll over at night, and so that number will definitely change for that. So I can provide that, Dr. Braden, to give you that information. But then I will say that the number is growing. Again, we have students qualifying for services that are delayed. And so we are past post-pandemic, but we're not past the issues that our pandemic has caused for our students who are not having access during that period of time to services and supports.
Is there a hope that the implementation of this program, once you get feedback from the parents, that it could help with the over caseload for the existing speech pathologists so that
Yeah,
it become a little
yes.
more manageable for them?
The overall goal was to create manageability, to create in-person speech services. Teletherapy is a proven best practice, for speech. However, we do know that in-person is best. We're there. They're there with the child. They can manipulate, the students' structures, and so there is no issues with teleprompting, computer issues, all of that. But again, but the goal is to get back to the in-person speech services. So that's why we were thinking out of the box as best we can to provide more in-person. So we do hope that once we send out the information to parents of who we selected, and so the RFP was for only in-person. And so that way, so we were sure to get just in-person agencies that will provide their services to come. It's a little more expensive, but yeah, it's in person. And so that was the overall goal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one other question about the learning labs. So I know that hiring paraprofessionals, retention of paraprofessionals it's been a struggle here. It's a national problem, but we have to deal with it locally. So in a scenario where a student needs a para all day, they just have significant needs, and they have turnover, that person quits, needs to be absent, and they have a learning lab in their school, what would happen to that student that day?
Well, we look at that student's individual needs. Okay, so we also share paras as well. And so the Learning Lab does give a space for students to go. And so we take a look at that, and we provide some sharing. Of course, we take a look at, we discuss that with the parent as well, that the paraprofessional is absent. And so therefore we are sharing, and that we're able to meet this child's needs. So we all come together to make sure. The beauty of the academic lab is that all the staff works together in the lab. So a support is support in the lab. And so it can be trade-off in that lab to make sure that we're addressing all students in the lab. So if a student loses a para, they can't access the lab in order to get that support while we take a look to see who we can bring in. One of our other agencies that we have with RFP, there are floater aids. And so I'll be looking to purchase floater aids. The floater aids, they can be used anywhere. And so, for example, I'm looking to purchase 5. And so through grants, and so that way those floater aids can be placed anywhere in a division. We have had difficulty, there's a lot of illness going around now, stomach flu, COVID. So some of our paras are out. And so, a school has an issue, then I can send a para over there to be in place of that one that's out until they get back. And then their assignment will change based on the needs of the division. So they will float the division, and so they will have various assignments based on the needs of the division.
Thank you, Dr. Walker.
Okay, we can go around again if we need to.
Yeah, and a couple follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with the labs, are there students that will be in the lab all day for the academic day?
It depends on the student. There could be some reverse inclusions, what we call, for students who, based on their needs, is very significant. We do try to make sure we access, the general education curriculum as much as possible. But if students require, that they have to spend more time in the lab, based on the IEP team, they will determine that as well. And so the lab will follow the IEP that the IEP team has determined. So
and then the staff of the lab is 4 people, sorry. When a student goes into the lab, does their paraprofessional go in with them so it increases the lab staff by 1?
Yes.
Okay. And
so also too, if a student does not need a para, the goal is to create independence from paraprofessionals. And so that's where the training will come into play. And so our goal is to have students be as independent as possible in a general education setting. And so if a student is in the lab and they're there with the adequate support and they are fine, that para can go work with another student. The adult support is what's written in the IEP. It's for students to receive adult support. Adult support can be paraprofessional, special ed teacher, gen ed teacher, adult support. And so, but we do, look at the individual student. And so, but our goal is to create independence. And so that way we don't have students who are at the middle school and high school level, dependent on paraprofessionals. So,
very good.
Unless they have mobility issues, vision, assistance, wheelchair and all that.
Right. And then revisiting what Ms. Franklin was bringing up earlier a little bit. So when an academic lab has 8 students in it at all times throughout the day, what occurs when we have a 9th student?
Then we take a look at that school, which has already happened. Some schools have already split and have developed additional lab space. And so, that's one area that we can do as well. Many of our staff have endorsements in adaptive, and so that gives them the ability to be able to, monitor another lab setting. We have a couple of schools. Matter of fact, there's 1, 2, 3 schools who have one setting for adaptive, and one for a therapeutic behavioral. And so to split those students that way, so it creates more space, more opportunity for other students to, for that school to go into and to be serviced.
So that school has 2 labs with,
2 labs.
with 4 professionals in each one?
So it depends on the number of students that are in the lab. So for example, you can have a lab of 8 and then another lab of 2. And so at that point, you wouldn't need 4 in there at that point in time. You need probably just a 2 paraprofessionals or a teacher paraprofessional at that point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Franklin? Great. With Dr. Guitry?
Just a quick one. Are you still trying to, I mean, you may have mentioned this, trying to hire another speech pathologist?
We always try to hire speech. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Because one of the concerns I have is if we work, I understand why you have these RFPs out, but one of my concerns is that if we become overly reliant on outside contracts in order to do core functions that we know we have obligations, and if they're employed by MCPS, there's more accountability and responsibility. And one of my concerns is if we're contracting too many services out. So, thank you.
Yes, that's the overall goal, is to get division speech pathologists. And so, and we have one person that's on staff. We have an SLPA who fits the criteria to go to school for the Grow Your Own program. And so, and she's interested in doing that. So.
Ms. Barton? Ms. Vaughn? Mr. Yourself? Okay. I'll just ask one more just to wrap up, but kind of building upon Dr. Gitry's question there. But so we're talking about contracting out. You've mentioned because of the in-person nature, they might be a little more expensive. We're talking about potentially paying for a tuition for folks to pursue masters in order to grow our own. Have we done a cost benefit just to decide, like, can we achieve the same thing by just paying our speech pathologists more?
Again, that's something that's, or we can certainly look at that point in time. But having them here, is our best option. We would like to do. Sure. And so that's something that we're looking at down the road. That's why we're discussing incentives. We're trying to pull out all the stops to make sure that we recruit and maintain our therapists, because everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's trying to recruit hard. Everybody's putting forward incentives. And so, but when you got a small pool, and that's what you do. And so, but I'm pleased to know that some of our current therapists are wanting to participate in the in-person, additional services. So there's additional funding for them to do that on top of what they're making right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Next up, Dr. Amanda Widener will present the MCPS staffing update.
Good evening, Chair Hudson, board members, Dr. Bragan. I'm going to present information that will give you data and information related to our staffing and vacancies that exist across the school division at this time. So I'll begin with just an overview of our current vacancies by category. At this time, we do have 8 administrator vacancies. Most of those are at the central office level. We do have 1 building vacancy. However, the good news is we do have 3 recommended candidates to fill 3 of those positions. So we are making progress on filling those. Very good news at the elementary level for our certified positions there. We are down to 1 vacancy, a reading specialist. And the good news there is we also have a candidate recommended to fill that position. Secondary certified positions, we're looking pretty good there. Currently, we have 1.5 vacancies. And so we don't have recommended candidates at that point, but we do have a long-term sub in one of those positions. The full-time position is a data coach, ITRT coach, so we're in the process of looking to fill that position. The other half vacancy is a PE position, and we do have a long-term sub in that position who is interested in getting certified. Special education, I think it's a familiar theme that's our hardest area to fill among our certified positions. So we do currently have 9 vacancies. 4 of those are SLP positions. 2 of those are special education teachers. There are some applicants out there among the teachers, so I feel confident that we will be able to fill those positions. And then among our classified vacancies, we have approximately 41 vacancies there. That number is a little more fluid. It does tend to fluctuate and change. The biggest number among our classified staff and vacancies are our para positions. We've got approximately 18 open positions that we're seeking to fill. Many of those are new positions. Second biggest area are custodians. We've got about a dozen custodial positions that we're trying to fill. The good news there is that within the last week, we've had 9 new applicants for custodians. We've done a couple of pop-up fairs this last month that have been helpful in trying to fill those positions. So again, that's our kind of a quick overview of our current vacancies across the school division. I just want to give you a highlight the number of positions we have filled for the current school year. So we have filled 14 administrator positions for this school year, and like I said, we do have 3 positions with recommended candidates. So hopefully those will be filled very soon. Elementary, again, we have a recommended candidate to fill our last open position there. So when that gets filled, that means we will actually have 42 positions that we have filled for elementary certified positions. For secondary, we have filled 67.5 positions. For special education, even though we have vacancies still to fill, we have filled a lot of positions this year. 29 special education positions have been filled for this year. And then among our classified positions, we have filled 70 positions, and we currently have 20 positions where we do have recommended candidates, or we've selected somebody that we're moving forward in the workflow process. So that just kind of gives you an overview on the amount of hiring that we've done for the current school year. I know you had asked about some retention information, so I just wanted to give you some simple numbers here, and I'm happy at the will of the board to give you more specific breakdown of information related to retention or relating to employee exits. But I looked at data from August 1st of 2023, so last August, through the summer, through July 31st. So over the course of that 12-month period, we had 285 employees in the school division exit. And these would be considered full-time, either classified or certified positions. So this does not count substitutes or what we would consider temporary employees. So 285 exits. Most of those were resignations. 225 individuals resigned. We did have 45 retirements and 15 separations. So again, I didn't break these down by position, and I could certainly give you a much more detailed breakdown if that information would be helpful to you. But we had 20 administrator exits, 105 certified teacher or instructional position exits, 160 classified employee exits. And since there has been inquiry and comments about the status of our minority employees, just for your information, 25 of those 285 employee exits are employees who would identify as minority employees. I thought that was an important number to put in front of you. So that just gives you some very basic information on our employee exit data. And again, that's just for the last year. If you want me to go back and look at previous years, I can bring you other information to give you comparisons if that is helpful. I also wanted to revisit how are we doing in terms of enhancing and increasing the diversity of our staff, since that is one of our division goals. I had presented a similar chart at the last meeting. I did a staffing update, so I just wanted to update that because the data is reflected now of the new hires for this year. So again, if you look at our minority certified and classified hires from 23-24, You can see those numbers and then compare them to where we are now, 24, 25. Those numbers could change because we are, particularly in the classified area, still seeking to hire and fill positions. But you can see we are increasing, we are moving in the right direction in terms of the percentage and hiring more minority employees. So again, I just wanted you to see that comparison. Currently, if you look at our new hires, 13.6% of them identify as minority employees. And if you look at all of our employees, 7.2% are identified as minority employees. So again, I just wanted you to see those numbers. And then the last piece of data I'll share with you is important because in talking about vacancies, it's important to talk about how we're doing in terms of subs, whether it's we're seeking substitutes to fill in for staff who are absent, but keep in mind we also use substitutes to fill in places where we have vacancies. So at this time, we have 330 active substitutes. That does include 23 current RIHIP substitutes. So RIHIP employees are our former employees who've retired, and through the RIHIP program, they are giving us a minimum of 35 days to sub. We do have 10 new RIHIP individuals who will be eligible to sub for us starting October 1st. They have to have a break from retirement to when they start with us. We also have, it's actually closer to 42 now, 42 additional substitutes that are scheduled for orientation that we'll be doing next week. So we are adding more substitutes to our sub pool. So far, our sub rate for teachers has been fairly good. We've been averaging about 93%. And you can see I've broken that down by community. The communities are fairly similar. Where we're struggling, as is evident, just in terms of the vacancies we have here, but it's always harder for us to fill our para positions. So we're averaging about 44% fill rate for our para positions. It's a little higher. Auburn seems to be doing better as a community filling those positions. But again, our goal is to continue to hire more subs. We did increase the sub rate for paras this year. And we will continue to advertise and look for additional substitutes to add to our sub pool. The HR department, we went to Gobbler Fest at Virginia Tech on Friday, and that was a great opportunity for us to connect with students. College students are a great pool who are often very interested in substituting. So we've had lots of new applications over the last few days. So the good news is we are continuing to get many applications of people who are interested in serving as substitutes in our schools. Can I answer any questions for you?
Great, thank you so much for that. Board, any questions?
So for me, listing the positions would be very helpful. So I would know, or the board would know, where we are trying to fill positions. And with the diversity hiring, so altogether, we have 1,718 employees, correct?
That was as of August 23rd. Might be a little bit higher now.
Okay, so that's only 123 minority hires, which is 7%, which, may sound good to some folks, but it's just not enough to show good representation to our students. And when you do the percentages out, for me, it's just a little misleading because the percentages look really good. 22 is 13%, 11 is 16%. But of what? It's just kind of confusing and to me a little misleading as to percentages look really good, but the actual numbers are not as good. But I appreciate the information. It's just not easy for me to follow.
And if there's a different format or more information you would like, I'm happy to present that information to you in a way that would be helpful.
Well, I've been trying to ask for information and I don't get the information, but again, when we use percentages outside of the whole numbers, in categories, it just makes things seem like that's so much better. Because if I look at 22 and I think, again, that's 13.4%. 13.4%, that's pretty high, or that's a good number compared to 1,718 employees, not so much. But that was last year, so anyway.
Ms. Franklin, if I would, I do think that what that is showing, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the intention of showing that is that we are hiring more minority candidates now than we were previously, right? Now by 3%, right? But those trends are in the right direction, right? Now to your point, there's still a disparity overall, right?
Right.
But if we keep up that trend, hopefully we can start to make a difference in that overall number.
Right. So again, we're hiring more, but what's it look like compared to what we're losing? So the overall number, which is what, 123? That's barely enough to put one person in each building.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Our goal is to continue to see those numbers go up.
Good.
Board, any other questions?
Yeah, so for the totals down there at the bottom, it'd be nice to have those broken out as certified and classified positions as well. And as far as the percentages are going, it's nice that the growth that we are seeing growth in minority hires. The minority population in Montgomery County is 12.4%. So our hiring rate's not yet at the minority population. And in order to get the total minority employment representative of the population, we'd have to grow significantly faster than that. So.
You did what I did, which was to go figure out that the population
Google.
ratio. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. We'll just go around. Ms. Purcell?
What is the orientation that subs get, and is there any other training or support that's offered to them? I know it's a very transient kind of position, and so I was just curious about that based on this slide.
The training for substitutes. So we do a half-day training for substitutes where we bring them in, we review policies, procedures. We do a section on classroom management and just some kind of basic information about what they need to know, what they can expect in a building. We have information from our special education department that is presented. That's particularly helpful for people who might be interested in substituting either for a special education teacher or for a para. Our technology department comes in and does part of that session with them, just explaining the different platforms that they'll be exposed to and how to use them, and just kind of gives them some tips for being able to, help students navigate things like Google Classroom. We go over some other procedural things with them, like how to navigate the frontline system, which we use for securing jobs. But that kind of covers the basics. And then when they're in buildings, sometimes, particularly if some people tend to focus or dedicate their subbing towards one particular building or a community, they may become more accustomed and get some other tips and training from staff there as well. But most of that basic training is done. It's about a half-day session.
So it's just the one orientation, and that's, yeah, okay. So what incentive, are there incentives at all for people who stay as subs, like they are reliable, they stay within the division for years, principals know that everything is going to be okay if, you know, the sub is here today to manage a classroom. How does that work?
I think substitutes that have established themselves that are known, whether it's in buildings in particular, teachers have the ability to request certain subs, and that happens particularly for planned absences. I think when principals or administrators come in a morning and they're looking at their vacancies and they're seeing the jobs that aren't filled, typically most of them have a list of their go-to subs that they'll refer to. You know, and they'll reach out to. So I think substitutes that are well established and people know them, they're often sought after to fill positions, particularly for planned absences. And a lot of times when long-term absences come up or we need somebody to fill a position for several weeks, oftentimes those individuals are sought after, especially if they have a license. I mean, for a long-term sub position, ideally we want someone with a license. But it's not a requirement unless they're going to be there for more than 90 days.
I was under the impression that if a person gets called as a sub, like so many consecutive days in a row, that there is additional payment. Is that?
For a long-term assignment, so if someone is secured in a long-term assignment, let's say, you know, you have a staff member who's going to be out on some type of leave, and we secure a long-term sub position, yeah, they get paid at a higher rate because they're in that job on a regular basis. They might be involved in helping develop lesson plans. They are obviously providing more stability, so we do have what's called a long-term sub rate.
So is there is that kind of like a word of mouth, like not word of mouth, but just an agreement, or is there something written to solidify that?
There is an agreement, so typically long-term sub arrangements are coordinated at the school level. So the school administrator is involved in selecting that person, and often they work with the teacher. Sometimes teachers have requests for who they may want to fill in for them as a long-term sub. So it is coordinated at the school level. And then there is an agreement form that we have that is signed by the principal and then submitted to the HR office, and we review and approve that. And a lot of times when we have somebody who's going to be out, you know, we will send a list and say, these are the current subs we have who have a license or who are licensed in this area. Because again, ideally, if we're going to have a staff member out long-term, we want to find a person who is the most qualified to fill that position for a long period of time.
Thank you.
Ms. Bond. Ms. Pardon. Dr. Guidry.
I'll keep this brief. First, I want to start by thanking you so much for providing some retention data. It would be great to get some more breakdown on that. I know that we're trying to make these shorter. If there was a way to get that information, it would be wonderful. I first want to ask a specific question about staffing, custodial staffing at, particularly at BHS. How is that doing? Because I've heard concerns about the cleanliness in that building for multiple people. And so can you speak to that issue? Are you able to?
I can, yes. So BHS is, I think we have 11 dedicated positions there. We've had 5 vacancies recently. We have Robbie Jones, who's our custodial manager, has been interviewing extensively. I want to say, if I remember correctly, we have two positions in there with individuals who are recommended to fill those positions. And like I said, we've had a number of recent applicants. So I know that's been one of the focus areas, that's a school we need to fill vacancies in, because
Okay,
they have had a number.
Because I know you've had different programming to try to fill that need, and but I'm glad that you're filling those positions. By my calculation, the turnover rate is around, I'm looking at the employee data, around 17%. Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
Is that normal to be expected? Because when I see that number, 285, I was like, that's quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
Is that normal?
I could pull some national data that we could compare it to, if that would be helpful. I want to say, like 2021, 22, I think I saw nationally, 84% of certified staff were returning to schools across the country. I mean, that was a national average.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it went up high. It was higher the next year in terms of the number of people not returning was higher. So if it's helpful, I could look, I could do some research and compare our retention rates to what it looks like across the state or across the
Yeah,
country.
I mean, that's one of my thoughts. The second is I know, with the diversity hiring and looking at this, I know organizations that will set targets. They'll be like, okay, so our turnover is 20%. We're going to make a target, and we want within 2 years to bring that down to 18% and work toward it. And I'm not saying that the division needs to do this, but part of the reason of having the data is just not just, oh, we're doing better, but to actually set targets so you can hold people accountable and work toward those targets. So that's one of the reasons I'm asking for that information is like, okay, so what is our turnover? So now we know, can we set some productive targets to reduce that? Because we want people to stay here and we want to do specific things, but if we're not tracking, then we don't know if we are doing what we need to do to retain good employees. So I think that it's good that we're moving in the right direction in some of these areas, but actually setting some targets saying, this is what we actually aspire to, and then getting the team on board to meet those, I think can be productive for an organization. But thank you for the start with getting us some retention data. I appreciate it.
I guess I'll just add, just to pile onto that, targets for the diversity hiring, would certainly be helpful, right, as well, right? And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Like what is our target? My mind immediately went to make it, representative of the population in the county, right? I think Dr. Roundtree's mindset was that too. But is that actually the goal? Is there a goal that we're shooting with? How do we know that we've hired enough? How do we know that we aren't hiring enough without some kind of goal, right? So whatever that's based on, you don't have to answer it right now, but I think that having that goal would certainly be helpful, and then we know if we're trending in the right direction or not. Okay, board, anything else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty, we are up to unfinished business. Are there any items of unfinished business?
So I have one. So in our presentation last week from Montgomery Central, I had a concern that our short-term suspensions, which the Phoenix program was actually created around, now those students aren't being served, which means they're going out the building, even though they have access to their lessons or whatever, they're still not getting the support. And if we have kids out of the building for 1 day to 5 days, they still need some better support. I'd like to know what we need to do to make that happen.
I wasn't here for that Phoenix program, but from what I heard from Mike Stanley at Montgomery Central, that the way it was operated just wasn't sustainable. That they would get notice that, hey, so-and-so's coming over today, or without actually getting advance notice planning, making sure they had the proper staffing, making sure they got the work. It's something we could look into doing. It would have to be a little bit more structured than what was shared with me as the way it transpired. Obviously, we don't want kids to be restricted from school and minimize that as much as we can. So reducing those out-of-school suspension rates would be a goal for all of us.
Okay, so I personally would like to see how we can do that. And I do recall that was one of the problems because students were in and out. But that's what the program was created for. So I just think we need to figure out how we support all the students who we feel need to be in an alternative setting for whatever amount of time.
So, not knowing the history, What is the advantage of a short-term alternative setting at Mont Central versus in-school suspension?
I don't, again, I wasn't here then, but from what was shared with me was the idea was that Bernie did something so egregious that it warranted a 5-day out-of-school suspension, whatever that was, an altercation, gross insubordination, something, whatever, that for the idea for the safety and the successful operation of the school, the principal felt that was needed to get me out of the school for 5 days, and typically an out-of-school suspension is, Bernie's at home for 5 days doing Lord knows what, right? So the idea was when that was going to happen, rather than do that, still support the building and setting the tone that whatever Bernie did was not appropriate, and like sending that message that that can't be tolerated, not sending him home, sending him to Montgomery Central. It has merit to that being out of the building, in that it was such an act of whatever it was that it needed that kind of attention, and having somewhere to go from Montgomery Central, that makes sense. But logistically, it didn't work when you got 20 buildings, primarily the secondary buildings, right? So you're looking at about 8 buildings. It was really hard to manage, and they became a burden that they couldn't manage well. Doesn't mean we can't look at doing that again. All of our schools have some type of version of in-school suspension, some better than others. So I don't know if I answered that or not, Dr. Roundtree, but I tried. But we could definitely look at what that would look like. So if we had a conversation with the staff over at Montgomery Central, what would you need for that to work? What would the communication be? How would we have to facilitate that? Because I think what I heard was it got to be, okay, I'm sending Derek out today. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Rather than send him home and getting a bus and he's going over to Montgomery Central. That's not sustainable. You can't plan for that. You can't have that. You know what I'm saying? So I think if that's something that we want to pursue as an option, we have to get more information on what the cost would be and how we could set that up. And then I'll bring it to all of you to talk about.
Yeah, my question was more to the point of if you're sending them outside of the building for something egregious, is it just as dangerous to send them to Mont Century if they're hyped up, or whereas converting things to in-school suspension, you keep the kids in the home school, and if it's a couple days, then it seems like it wouldn't be that egregious that you couldn't just have them in in-school suspension. But it's just a philosophical question.
I was going to say, these are philosophical questions that we have to look at, and what do we want to do as a board, and right now we have a code of conduct that dictates which type of behaviors warrant out-of-school suspension, and we have the matrix which we're supposed to be following and going through all that. So these are things that we could talk about and come back and say, we've decided, to go in a different way and have a different alternative. Our goal for this year, one of them is to reduce all out-of-school suspensions and to get more of our kids engaged in the learning process and feel that they're enfranchised and part of the school. When kids are engaged and they feel like they're connected to their school, their teacher, their buildings, they tend not to misbehave, right? So that was the focus. That is a focus ongoing. So, but having all these tools at our disposal could only help us.
Yeah. And if you remember, Mr. Stanley talked about the reporting that we were doing for in-school and out-of-school suspension was not correct, and we had to correct that. So keeping the kids in school versus out, it's a reporting at the state level that has to be done. So from my recollection about the Phoenix program, and this may have gone astray, it wasn't at 10 o'clock, you're going home. It was, okay, we know you're going home for 2 to 5 days or whatever. And then that next day, when that started, that's when the child would go. So there was notice, you're getting this child, and not, at 12 o'clock, we're sending you out the building. Because if you're sending someone out of the building at 12 o'clock, I think they're probably going to be out for more than just that few hours of the day.
Yeah, again, I wasn't here with some of the information I heard, but we could look into all that and come back with options for all of you.
I think before I was on the board, we had a family friend who had a student get in some trouble and be sent over there for a short-term thing. It wasn't clear to me if that was Phoenix, but it sounds like it. And their complaint was, you're mixing in students with different levels of achievement, right? You got students going over there in honors this and AP that and D this mixed in with students that aren't at that level. So the level of education, the value of that time, I think the question is it worth putting them over there? Because, you're basically expecting the Montgomery Central staff to be able to teach everything at every level in order to meet every student's needs. And that's not realistic. But I don't know that much about it. I don't think that's just okay. Definitely worth giving that one some more thought to see if there's an alternative version that might make more sense. Are there any other items of unfinished business?
Yeah, just follow up on a comment of Dr. Bragan's. It would be interesting to know what is the differences in ISS across the division.
I can get that.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any items of new business?
I had one, Board Chair, if you don't mind. One of our former board members, Ms. Marty Graham, is doing a lot of work on trying to reduce vaping within the district, and she wanted to present some of the ideas and things that she came up with. And she asked if I could share with the board if we would allow her some time at our next meeting to present on that.
So this would be a personal presentation, or?
It is something that she's doing, not connected to a particular group per se, just a concerned citizen.
And because of that question, Ms. Franklin, that's why we felt like it should come before the board as a conversation versus certainly it's a priority of this board, right? But as an individual citizen not aligned with any particular organization, it's an interesting case.
Interesting because she's a former board member, or interesting because we don't get that many requests from individuals to do that? Yeah, I think that would open the door. Because I'll tell you what, if I was sitting out there, I'd say, okay, my turn. Yeah.
I agree. I don't know. Even though the cause is a good cause, I think if we're going to look into something like that, I think we need to inquire our law enforcement to give some kind of a report on the effects of vaping or to that nature.
But would love to have whatever information that she has or suggestions sent to us.
Sure.
Okay, we can do that.
And it would be great if there was a community organization that could be founded around her ideas or whatever else, just to kind of get some momentum behind that. That would be helpful, right?
Well, I tell you what this board could do is form a community committee to start talking about how do we do this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like, is there a majority on the board who is interested in having her present, or are we saying we'd rather have an alternative means? We'd like to have the information available to us, but not necessarily her present it. So I guess raise your hand if you're interested in her presenting. Let's get a vote. Okay. Raise your hand if you're interested in getting the information and pursue other means of making progress on this problem. Okay. No, it's fair. Right. Either way. Right. Okay.
And no disrespect to the
Absolutely.
work that Marty has worked toward, and I respect that immensely. It's just, I agree with Ms. Franklin 100%. That is a slippery slope, and I know I say that all the time, but if you open the door, the next person's going to say, wait a minute, it's my turn. I have a passion for this, and I really believe it's important for the school system to hear what I've got to say. And I just think it's opening the door. And I understand we've got huge problems with vaping, and I'm all about that. But I think we need, like I said, listening to what someone's opinion is very different than an organized group that has facts, functional data,
This isn't an opinion-based presentation, it's a data-driven research presentation.
Yeah.
It's still by a community member.
Right.
That could bring forth anything that they would want. They may say it could be on a dress code policy, it could be on nutritional fact, anything that could affect the school system. And understandably, I respect the work. I just think that it would be opening the door to anybody who, for an example, last year we had a group who had started an organization against, I forget the name, the girls, what was it? I mean, we didn't allow them to come and speak, but they came and spoke at public address many times. And so that had reached out with young adults and rape issues.
You're talking about the Bowmans.
Yeah, but I can't think of the name of the organization that they had started.
It was the Moms
something.
or other.
So, but we never allowed them to come and
Right.
speak.
I think that's not comparable to this particular presentation, and we are a public body that represents our county, and we're not overloaded with requests from the community to do this, and it's not impossible to deal with a request on case-by-case basis.
So what organization is she working with?
As far as I know, there is not a specific organization, but it's a collection of local stakeholders and public health experts and
So
and RVCS, Dr. Bissell. It's not.
It would be great to have Dr. Bissell.
yeah, now
present
Dr.
and our
Bissell,
VCS
I could
present.
see
Absolutely.
coming and speaking on it, and law enforcement. And I would welcome Marty to come public address on it because I am interested in what she has to say. But as far as giving a presentation, formal presentation, I would rather have that from the health department or from law enforcement or some organization of that matter.
And we have had citizens give us very data-driven reports for us to look at, and they send them to us, or they hand them to us to be able to see the information.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ms. Purcell. I think this is a little bit different. This is somebody that was sitting on this, in these seats recently and has the experience identifying that this is a problem in our school system. And since she exited, she's been researching what can be done about it, who are the stakeholders involved, and coming to us and presenting that material is beneficial for our school district in order to help reduce this epidemic of vaping that we have. That being said, I mean, she can also make an organization here in the community if she's already been talking to several people. 3 people makes an organization.
Cool. She can come talk at public address. She can share information and advocate for NRVCS or other groups to come present to us. Any other items of new business? All right. Are there any announcements? There are no announcements. All right. Upcoming school board meetings. Our upcoming meetings are listed in our board docs here. There was the note that went out about the conflict of meeting times in October, and so we're tentatively still holding on to a date, I think, just in case the administration needs to bring something to us in closed session. But we'll make that decision as we get closer to it, and the administration can kind of know if there are student matters, if there's employee decisions that need to be made. They can't be pushed off to a later date. All right. Do I have a motion to enter into closed session as authorized by Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia to discuss 2 personnel matters and 3 student matters?
Second.
Ms. Franklin and Ms. Purcell, any discussion? Ms. Osborne, please call the roll.
Ms. Bond?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Guthrie?
Yes.
Ms. Parton?
Yes.
Ms. Purcell?
Yes.
Dr. Roundtree?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
7 in favor.
Motion carries. Now in closed session.